I'm Marcus, 31, and apparently the designated financial backup plan for my entire family. I work in cybersecurity for a mid-sized tech firm. It's not glamorous, but it pays well. Especially this year, I just landed a $15,000 end-of-quarter bonus for heading a successful ransomware mitigation. I've been thinking about using part of it to finally take that trip to Kyoto I've been dreaming about for years. That, or maybe upgrading my car, which has a mysterious clunk every time I reverse. But I hadn't touched the bonus yet. It was just sitting there, quietly in my savings, like a promise to myself. Then I got a text from my mom. Dinner at Aunt Brenda's tonight. Just a casual thing. Or something nice. Casual? Aunt Brenda's version of casual usually means plastic tablecloths and maybe a Spotify playlist if someone remembers to bring a speaker. I wasn't expecting much. I pulled up around 6:45. The street was packed. Cars were lining both curbs, and there was bass thumping loud enough to rattle my dashboard. For a split second, I thought maybe there was a block party. But when I walked up to Brenda's driveway and saw the balloon arch, I stopped cold. Surprise baby shower, a giant banner screamed in glittery gold letters. I blinked. People I barely recognized were already holding red cups and dancing. A DJ was blasting throwback hits from the early 2000s, and 3 folding tables groaned under the weight of catered food. There had to be at least 90 people here. Some of them were coworkers from my brother's job. A few were from my mom's church. There were even Instagram influencers taking selfies next to a professionally decorated photo wall that said, #Baby Mikey coming soon. Baby Mikey. My brother Brian's unborn son. I stepped inside, trying to find someone who could explain what was happening. I finally spotted my mom near the buffet table, holding court like some suburban queen. She looked at me like I was the last one to show up for my own surprise party. There you are. She smiled wide, then added under her breath, "Did you bring a gift?" "I thought this was just a casual dinner," I said. She gave a dramatic sigh. "Well, technically it is. Just with a bit more love." I didn't laugh. "Where did all this come from?" I asked, gesturing at the DJ, the catered food, the personalized party favors, and the banner with my brother's face photoshopped onto a cartoon baby. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Marcus," she said, like I was asking why the sky was blue. "It's for family. You wouldn't want your little nephew's first big celebration to be disappointing, would you?" Something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. I stepped away and checked my phone. Opened my banking app. And there it was. $10,200. Gone. Multiple transactions. All within the last 4 days. Catering. Event planning service. Balloon company. Venue deposit, which I'm pretty sure was illegal since this was Aunt Brenda's house. DJ rental. Even a $400 influencer partnership fee. All charged to my card. My personal savings card. I felt my face go cold. I never gave anyone access to that account. Except, I turned back to Mom. "You used my bonus." She didn't deny it. Didn't flinch. Just gave me this look like I was being unreasonable. "It's for family," she repeated, as if that answered everything. "And don't act like you can't afford it. You never do anything with your money anyway." I stared at her. At my brother across the room, giving a toast with a mimosa in hand like he was some kind of celebrity. At the cake shaped like a baby bottle, with "Thanks, Uncle Marcus," written in blue icing. And I felt empty. All those hours I worked. All the overtime. All the stress and pressure and migraines. That bonus was supposed to be mine. A reward. A breath of fresh air after a long grind. And they took it like I was just a walking wallet. Not even with permission, just assumption. Entitlement. I didn't say a word. I left the party without touching the food. Without saying goodbye. When I got home, I stared at my laptop for a full minute before I started typing. I filed a fraud report for every transaction. I froze all connected cards. Changed every password. Removed every authorized user, yes, even Mom, who I'd once added as an emergency contact to make her feel included. Then I opened a shared folder of my budget records, just for kicks, and scrolled through all the past expenses I'd covered. Rent top-ups. Grocery runs. Brian's car insurance. Dad's dental bill. Even the time Mom needed a little help paying for a one-time church fundraiser that turned out to be a cruise. They always framed it as helping the family. But I was never asked. Just expected. I wrote one email. Just one. Subject line. "You made your choice." I attached screenshots of the charges, the fraud reports, and the emails confirming their reverse transactions. Then I added a little note. "This was not your money to take. I'm done being your safety net." I sent it at 1:13 a.m. By 6:50, my phone was vibrating nonstop. 32 missed calls. Text from Dad. What did you do? A voicemail from Mom that started with Marcus. This is not how we handle things in this family, and ended with what sounded suspiciously like a sniffle. But the kicker? The banging on my apartment door at 7:05 a.m. Brian, pounding so hard I thought he'd crack the frame. I didn't open the door. I watched as Brian shouted into the hallway, waving his phone like it was a weapon, like he could force the money back into his account by sheer volume. I didn't flinch, didn't say a word, just waited, leaning against the wall, arms folded. Eventually, he ran out of steam and left, muttering something about calling Mom. I already knew she was blowing up my inbox, 8 unread emails, all subject lined with varying levels of guilt. We need to talk. You're being ridiculous. I'm your mother. I spent the rest of that morning in silence. No music, no TV, just me, my laptop, and a fresh mug of coffee while the chaos brewed outside. I didn't reply to anyone. I didn't have to. The damage was done. But I wasn't just going to let them stew. I wanted them to understand why. At noon, I forwarded a detailed, itemized list to the family group chat. It included every transaction made without my permission, with dates and timestamps. I highlighted and read the charges for influencer package tier 2 to 4 Instagram post plus story and premium DJ experience, 5 hours. Then I attached a screenshot of my savings balance. What was left of it? A little under $5,000. All that remained after months of grinding. The message I sent with it was short. If you think this is acceptable behavior, you've misunderstood who I am. This isn't a conversation. It's a conclusion. 3 people left the group chat within the hour. Brian didn't. He kept sending voice messages, each one more pathetic than the last. The first was angry. The second was full of excuses. The third? That one was my favorite. Come on, man. It wasn't even my idea. Mom said you'd be fine with it. I thought you'd be proud, you know? That you helped. You always help. He said it like that, you always help. As if that made it normal. As if that was a job I'd signed up for, and not something they forced onto me year after year until I stopped questioning it. And I realized something in that moment. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the expectation. The way they saw me. Not as Marcus. Not as a brother. Not even as a son. Just a debit card with legs. The texts didn't stop. That night, Mom called 15 times. Then Dad tried. Then Aunt Brenda. I didn't answer any of them. But the guilt-tripping voicemails rolled in like clockwork. Marcus, this is your family. Don't throw us away over some money. You're embarrassing us. What are people going to think? Your nephew's baby shower is ruined. Ruined. Can't you just let it go? Let it go. Like they hadn't stolen from me. Like I was the one overreacting. But they weren't ready for what came next. Because I wasn't just done with their theft. I was done with being their crutch. The next day, I went into full audit mode. I opened up every joint account, every authorized payment I'd been covering quietly in the background for years. I made a list: Mom's gym membership, Dad's phone plan, Brian's Netflix account. Funny, he never even asked for the password, just logged in one day and stayed there. I cut everything. I emailed every service provider, changed every password, transferred my checking account to a new bank entirely and canceled the old card. I even pulled the home insurance I'd been paying for on the family house, just temporarily, you know, since they just needed help for a few months. It had been over 2 years. By the end of the week, they weren't just blocked from my finances. They were blocked from me. That Friday night, I turned off my phone, opened a new browser tab, and finally did it. I booked a solo trip to Japan. A 2-week getaway. No family, no drama, just me and the sound of Kyoto rain on temple rooftops. It felt like breathing after months of being underwater. But of course, they couldn't let that go. The next morning, I was woken by a knock on my door. Not pounding this time. Just steady. Persistent. I checked the peephole. It was Mom. No makeup. Puffy eyes. Hair pulled back in a messy bun that looked like she hadn't slept. And standing just behind her, arms crossed and looking equally defeated, was Dad. She knocked again. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. But she started talking anyway, voice trembling like she thought maybe I was right behind the door, maybe hoping guilt alone would pull the lock open. Marcus, we didn't mean to hurt you. We just thought it was for family. And we thought you'd understand. You always do. Silence. She kept going. I told Brian to use your card. I thought you'd be okay with it. You always help. There it was again. That phrase. You always help. As if being kind once meant I'd signed a lifetime contract. As if saying no made me selfish. As if my value was tied entirely to how convenient I was for them. I watched her shoulders slump. She waited another minute, then walked away. I stayed at the door long after they were gone, just listening to the silence. It was the loudest piece I'd ever heard. But the story wasn't over. Because later that night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. No voicemail. No text. Just one missed call and a sinking feeling in my gut. Then another. Then another. Then a text finally came through. From Brian. Just 4 words. You need to see this. I opened the attached photo. And when I did, I just sat there, staring at it. Because in that photo was something I never expected. It was a photo of a letter. Handwritten. Folded once, like it had been tucked inside something. At the bottom, in smeared ink, was my name, Marcus, in my mother's handwriting. But the letter wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed about me. I zoomed in. If he ever finds out, we'll just say we didn't know. He never asks questions. He just fixes things. That's what Marcus does. My stomach dropped. I scrolled down to the rest of the message. It was scrawled in a familiar messy rush, like Mom had written it while pacing. The ink was blotchy in places, like she'd pressed too hard. Some lines were crossed out. Others were underlined twice. Brian says we should tell him the baby shower was just a surprise, but I already used the money. I told the planner it was fine. We had the funds. Marcus got that bonus. I'm not asking, not again. He'll forgive me. He always does. Besides, it's not really stealing if we're family, right? I stared at the text for a long time. At first, I thought it had to be a fake. A joke. But I recognized the stationery. Mom's weird floral print notepads, the ones she ordered in bulk from those catalog mailers that still think it's 1996. She used them to leave notes for the house cleaner and the landscaper when I was growing up. They were hers. And that handwriting? That was definitely hers too. Then Brian sent another message. Found it in Mom's desk when I was trying to get into her old phone. She doesn't know I saw it. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My fingers hovered over the screen, but nothing I could type felt like enough. Not anger. Not betrayal. Not even disbelief. Because deep down, I think part of me always knew. The way they treated me, it wasn't just obliviousness. It was calculated. Strategic. Like I was a chess piece they kept on the board just long enough to sacrifice at the right time. This letter was proof. Not a misunderstanding. Not a mistake. A choice. They chose to use me. To take my money behind my back. To lie if they had to. And worse, they believed I'd always forgive them. Always. I put the phone down. Walked to the kitchen. I don't even remember pouring the glass of water. I just remember my hand shaking. Not with rage, exactly. More like the ghost of something colder. Something final. I opened my laptop again. I had already cut off their access. I had already blocked them from my finances. But now? Now, I needed to block them from me. I pulled up my email and started typing methodically, carefully, with the same clarity I use when drafting incident reports at work. No emotion. Just facts. The subject line, a final note. The body of the email, you didn't just spend my money. You spent my trust. You planned it. You wrote about it. You decided I was too predictable to push back. I don't care if you were just trying to help the family. I am part of this family too. And I will no longer be the one who sacrifices so everyone else can stay comfortable. This isn't me being cruel. This is me being done. If you reach out again, do so through a lawyer. Marcus. I hit send. Then I deleted the group chat thread, archived all the voicemails, and blocked every number. Except one. Brian's. I hesitated on that. Because as messed up as he was, he'd sent the letter. Maybe out of guilt. Maybe self-preservation. Maybe because he was scared he was next on the chopping block. Whatever the reason, he cracked the illusion. And he gave me the one thing I never expected from my family, proof. But as I sat back down on the couch, still gripping my phone, a new message popped up. From Brian. This one wasn't about the letter. It was a screenshot. An email from Mom. Sent the night after the baby shower. Subject line. Emergency, Marcus might find out. The body? That was the part that really made my jaw clench. If he freezes the accounts before the refunds come through, we're done. I need you to convince him it was all a mix-up. Tell him I didn't know about the charges. Play dumb if you have to, he'll believe you. He trusts you. Do not let him feel betrayed. If he cuts us off, we lose everything. Brian didn't say anything else. No apology. No defense. Just the screenshot. And a single message beneath it. Didn't know she sent this. Just found it now. Do what you gotta do. I stared at the screen, and in that moment, I realized something. They never thought I'd walk away. They thought I couldn't. But I was already gone. I sat with that last message for a while. The screenshot, the subject line, the desperation in Mom's words, it all felt surreal. Like the final puzzle piece I didn't want but needed. I always suspected she could be manipulative, but I'd never seen it in writing. Never seen the strategy spelled out so clearly. The twisted idea that all it would take was one lie, one well-acted apology, and I'd fold like I always did. Except this time, I wasn't folding. This time, I was burning the whole playbook. I didn't reply to Brian's message. I didn't need to. He'd done his part, maybe out of guilt, maybe just to save himself, but he cracked the dam wide open. And I wasn't patching it back together. Instead, I forwarded the email to myself, then printed it, along with the letter he'd sent earlier. I tucked them into a folder labeled Personal Records. Not because I planned to sue anyone, at least not yet, but because I wanted a reminder. Physical proof that I wasn't imagining things, that I wasn't overreacting, that my family chose to betray me. I needed that clarity, because walking away is one thing. Staying away? That's the hard part, especially when they try to crawl back in. And oh, did they try? It started with the phone calls, mostly from Aunt Brenda, who tried the classic, "I'm neutral in this, but just want the family whole again," routine. Then came the text from cousins I barely talked to, suddenly checking in, dropping phrases like, "We're worried about you," and "You know your mom only meant well." But the worst? The envelope that showed up a week later. No return address. Just my name written in Mom's handwriting. Inside was a 4-page letter. The first 2 pages were a rambling mess, half apology, half emotional blackmail. She wrote about how hard it was raising 2 boys on a tight budget. About how I was always the quiet one, the reliable one. About how she didn't mean for things to spiral and only wanted to make the baby shower special. She never used the words, "I stole from you." She never admitted she lied. She just kept saying how disappointed she was that I let money come between us. But page 3 is what sealed it. "We had no choice, Marcus. You have so much, and Brian has always struggled. I just thought, if we didn't take care of this for him, who would?" That sentence, "We had no choice." It echoed in my mind for days. Like there was some universal rule that having more meant I owed them. That I was obligated to compensate for Brian's mistakes, his laziness, his entitlement. That my success was just a tool for their convenience. That I didn't get to keep what I earned. That I didn't deserve to. Page 4 was blank. Just her signature at the bottom. As if she thought that was enough to close the book. I didn't write back. I shredded the letter. A few days after that, I made an appointment with a therapist. First session was over Zoom. The second one was in person. By the third, I found myself saying things I didn't even realize I'd been carrying for years. How I was expected to be the peacemaker, the fixer, the quiet one. How Brian could fail upwards for his entire life and still be treated like royalty, while I was the family ATM machine in slacks. How every major moment in my adult life was either overshadowed, hijacked, or dismissed by my family in some way. My first promotion, my new apartment, even the time I got published in an industry journal. Mom once said, "Oh, that's nice," and then launched into a 15-minute rant about how Brian's ex-girlfriend was trying to keep him from seeing his dog. That therapy appointment was the first time I said aloud, "I think my family never saw me as a person." The therapist didn't even flinch. She just nodded and said, "That sounds incredibly painful." It was. But it also felt like lifting a weight off my chest that I didn't even know I'd been carrying since I was a teenager. In the weeks that followed, I started reclaiming parts of my life. I filed a formal fraud report with my bank, and within 3 weeks, the full $10,200 was returned to my account. I also set up identity theft monitoring, just in case. I contacted every service I'd been covering for my parents and made sure all accounts were fully transferred or closed. I even got a new phone number. It was tedious, but worth it. The quiet that followed was strange. At first, I kept expecting the next explosion. A call, a letter, a knock on the door. But none came. Eventually, the silence settled in like a warm blanket. Not absence, peace. I started going out more. Bought myself a camera and picked up photography again, something I hadn't touched since college. I stopped checking my old group chats, stopped waiting for guilt to knock on my door. It never did. Or if it did, I didn't answer. And when the trip to Kyoto finally came, I went. 2 full weeks, alone. I visited shrines in the early morning when the world was still foggy and quiet. I ate in ramen shops where nobody knew my name. I walked through gardens, took photos of cherry blossoms, and sat beside koi ponds for hours doing absolutely nothing. No demands. No guilt trips. Just me. And for the first time in my adult life, that was enough. On the last night, I sat under a lantern-lit bridge in Guyane and scrolled through the photos I'd taken. One caught my eye, just a simple shot of my reflection in the water. Blurry. Off-center. But something about it felt right. Like I was finally seeing myself clearly. Not the fixer. Not the wallet. Not the reliable backup plan. Just Marcus. 31 years old. Independent. Whole. When I got home, there was one last envelope waiting for me. This one wasn't from Mom. It was from Brian. No return address, just a folded note and a photo. The note said, "I'm moving. Got a job offer in another state. Wanted you to have this. I know I don't deserve anything, but for what it's worth. I'm sorry, and thank you." The photo was from the baby shower. A candid shot of me standing near the entrance, the moment I realized what was happening. My face said it all: shock, confusion, hurt. I didn't even remember someone taking it. But written on the back, in his handwriting, was one last message. "You deserved better than this." I didn't cry. I didn't call him. But I tucked the photo away, not as a memory of betrayal, as a reminder of why I'll never go back. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And boundaries aren't cruelty, they're healing. My family made their choice. And for once, I chose myself. I was 19 the last time I saw my parents. They stood in the doorway of our home, my childhood home, and told me I had until sunset to pack my things and leave. No tears, no long emotional goodbye, not even a decent explanation. Just a cold stare from my father and a tight-lipped silence from my mother, as if I were some tenant whose lease had expired. I remember standing there, backpack already on my shoulder, half-full suitcase at my feet, trying to understand how everything unraveled so fast. One day I was their son. The next, I was a burden they couldn't wait to shake off. My name's Cole. I'm 27 now, and while I've moved on, built a life for myself, quiet, modest, nothing flashy, there's a part of me that still circles back to that moment, like an echo I can't shake. It's not just the betrayal that stings, but the sheer speed of it. One minute I was eating dinner at our worn-down oak table, and the next, my parents were accusing me of being ungrateful, of taking too long to grow up, of costing too much for someone doing so little. The truth? I wasn't perfect. I wasn't some prodigy or overachiever. I had just dropped out of college that spring, unsure of what I wanted, struggling with anxiety I hadn't yet learned to name. My friends were graduating, moving into internships, posting their new apartments on social media, and I was stuck, lost. But I was trying. I worked 2 part-time jobs and had started taking online classes again. I helped out around the house, paid rent when I could, and never asked for more than the bare minimum. None of that seemed to matter. My parents, my father, especially, saw me as dead weight. And when I pushed back, when I finally spoke up during one of his tirades and said I wasn't going to be talked to like some stranger on the street, he made good on his promise. He kicked me out that night. Said if I wanted to live like an adult, I could start by figuring things out without his roof or money. I never went back. Never called. Never sent a letter. And they never reached out either. Not once in 8 years. The only person who ever kept in touch was my grandmother, my dad's mom, believe it or not. She was the only one who looked at me with softness, even when I was at my lowest. Her name was Evelyn, and if I had to describe her, I'd say she was half whiskey, half wildflower. A woman who grew up during the war, married young, raised 3 kids, buried 2, and still managed to smile like life hadn't broken her. She lived up in the mountains, about 3 hours away from where I eventually settled, and over the years, we exchanged letters and phone calls. Nothing overly sentimental. She wasn't that kind of person, but enough to know she still thought about me. She passed away last month, peacefully, in her sleep, 93 years old. When I got the call from her lawyer, it was like being doused in cold water. I hadn't even known she was sick. She'd hidden it from me, probably on purpose. She hated pity. The lawyer, a man named Garrett Andrews, said she'd left a will, that I'd been named in it, that she wanted me to be present for the reading. It was all very formal, very specific. She insisted on it being read in person, Garrett told me. At the cabin. The cabin. God, I hadn't been up there since I was a kid. back when family still meant Sunday dinners and summer hikes. I had memories of fishing with her on the dock, of her swatting at mosquitoes with a dish towel while telling me stories about the war, of me falling asleep on that old plaid couch while she played some dusty record in the background. I took time off work and made the drive up the mountain on a crisp Tuesday morning. The trees were just starting to turn, golden reds and fire-orange leaves dotting the sides of the winding road. The air smelled like pine and smoke and something older I couldn't name. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, the first thing I saw was the truck. A brand new, lifted Ford F-150. Too clean to belong here. I parked beside it, already uneasy, and stepped out of my car. That's when I saw them. My parents. My mother was in a beige coat, fur-lined, her hair styled in soft waves I didn't remember her ever having. My father stood beside her, arms crossed, that same condescending frown on his face he always wore when he was trying to look important. Behind them stood my cousin Rachel, early 30s, all sharp cheekbones and fake sympathy, holding a tablet and looking like she was about to pitch a sales plan. I should have turned around then, but I didn't. I walked forward, slow and cautious, like stepping into a room with too many traps. My mother turned first. Her eyes went wide for a second before she plastered on a smile. "Cole," she said, voice airy, as if we were bumping into each other at a farmer's market. "Oh my, I didn't know you were coming. You were invited?" My father added, squinting at me like I was some contractor who'd wandered onto his land. "She left me a message," I replied evenly. "Said the will was being read today." "Here." Rachel stepped forward, sliding her sunglasses onto her head. "Isn't it wild being back? Gosh, it's been, what years?" "8, I said. She laughed like I'd told a joke. Garrett Andrews appeared on the porch just then, holding a thick folder and a small box under one arm. His suit looked too crisp for the cabin, but he wore it like armor. He glanced between us, clearly sensing the tension, then motioned for everyone to come inside. We filed into the living room like strangers. The fireplace was lit, the air inside just warm enough to feel cozy. Nothing had changed. The couch was still there. The record player. The photos on the wall. Me and Grandma fishing. Her wedding picture. One of her 3 children at the beach, back when they were all still alive. My dad lingered near the fireplace, staring at the photo for a second too long before returning to his usual indifference. Garrett didn't waste time. He cleared his throat and began reading the will. Most of it was standard. Small sums of money left to friends, a few personal items given to neighbors. Then came the bigger stuff. To my son, Ronald, that's my dad, and his wife, Karen, I leave my Buick and my collection of vinyl records. My mother blinked. "Wait, the Buick?" "And the records," Garrett confirmed, moving on. Rachel got a set of antique silverware and a note that said, "For hosting the worst Thanksgiving I ever endured." I almost choked. Rachel didn't laugh. Then Garrett paused. His expression shifted, just a little. He reached into the folder and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This," he said slowly, "was a letter Evelyn asked me to deliver by hand. To Cole, and Cole only." He handed it to me. The room fell into a suffocating silence. My father shifted. My mother frowned. Rachel looked like someone had slapped her. "What's in it?" my dad asked. Garrett raised a brow. "That's not for you to know." I held the envelope. My name was written on the front in Grandma's careful handwriting. Just seeing it again made my throat tighten. "Wait," my mother said suddenly, glancing between Garrett and my father. "What about the property?" Garrett turned to her. "You mean the cabin?" "Yes," she said, laughing a little too loudly. "Evelyn always said she wanted the family to have it. We've already started talking to contractors about renovating it into a rental lodge. It's the perfect location." He held up a hand. "The cabin wasn't left to either of you." Now it was my father who snapped. "Then who?" Garrett looked at me. "Evelyn left it to Cole. The cabin, the land, everything." And just like that, the room turned to stone. My parents froze. Rachel dropped her sunglasses. And me? I hadn't even opened the letter yet. But I knew, deep down, I was about to find out why. And they were about to find out they'd made a mistake. A very big one. I didn't open the letter right away. I probably should have. Maybe it would have given me some armor before the storm hit. But something in me, something old and bruised, knew I needed to wait. Not out of fear, but because I wanted them to feel it. The not knowing. The unease. It was the first time in my life I'd held power in a room with them. Real power. The kind that doesn't come from yelling louder or dressing sharper or having a bigger bank account. No, this was different. This was the weight of Grandma's will behind me. Her words, still sealed in an envelope, and somehow, I could feel them humming. My father was the first to recover. He stepped forward, arms tense at his sides. This has to be a mistake. Garrett didn't blink. I assure you, it's not. But Evelyn told us. She said she wanted the family to use this place. She talked to me about renovations, updating the foundation, modern plumbing. She wanted it turned into something livable. Garrett clasped his hands. If she said that, it wasn't reflected in her will. She left the cabin, the land, and all its contents to Cole, sole beneficiary. It's legally binding. My mother's face was tight, her lips thinning to a line. She was in her 90s. She might not have been in her right mind. She was, Garrett said plainly. I had her medical evaluations cleared and notarized. She passed 2 cognitive screenings before finalizing her estate. Maybe Cole manipulated her. Rachel cut in, voice sharp now. Maybe he pressured her. Got in her head. I snorted. I couldn't help it. I haven't even seen her in 6 months. The last time we talked, she chewed me out for not replacing the brake pads on my car. Real manipulative of me. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Don't be smug. Why not? I said, still calm. You've been smug your whole life. I figure I'm overdue. It was like someone had cracked the window and let a cold wind blow through. Rachel blinked slowly, but she didn't argue. She just took a seat, crossed her legs, and pulled out her phone like she was suddenly too busy for the conversation. My dad turned on Garrett again. And there's nothing in there for us? No trust, no clause, nothing. Garrett scanned the remaining pages. No, just a note for you both. He handed over a single folded paper. They unfolded it like it might bite. My father read it first. His jaw clenched. Then my mother read it, and her hand covered her mouth. Garrett didn't ask for it back. He didn't need to. I could guess what it said. She'd always had a way with brutal honesty. After that, the room fractured. Rachel stood and walked outside without a word. My mother followed slowly, dazed, like someone trying to solve a riddle in a language they didn't understand. My father lingered by the fireplace for a moment longer, staring into the flames like he was hoping they'd offer him answers. When he finally turned to me, there was something unfamiliar in his eyes. It wasn't regret. It wasn't sadness. It was resentment. You think you've won something, he said quietly, but you don't understand what you're getting into. I stared back. Neither did you when you kicked me out. He flinched. Not much, but I saw it. Then he walked out, boots heavy on the floorboards, and the cabin was silent again. Garrett cleared his throat. Do you want to read the letter alone? I nodded. Yeah, thanks. He left without another word. And just like that, I was alone in the place that had once been a sanctuary, and now, somehow, felt like a fuse waiting to be lit. I didn't read the letter until later that night. After they left. After the sun dropped behind the treetops and the sky went from bruised purple to velvet black. I made a fire, poured myself a glass of her ancient whiskey I found in the cabinet, and sat in the armchair by the window, the one with the lopsided cushion that had always squeaked when I shifted. The letter was written on thick, cream paper in her usual neat cursive. Cole, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. Which means I no longer have to pretend to be polite to people who don't deserve it. I want you to know I always saw you. You were never invisible to me, even when they tried to make you feel like a shadow. I saw how hard you tried, how much you carried, how much you were blamed for simply existing. That house was never warm, not after your grandfather passed. I think your father learned the wrong lessons from him. How to punish, but not how to forgive. How to expect, but not how to give. You didn't deserve what happened, and I couldn't stop it, but I could give you this. The cabin is yours. Everything in it. The land, too. They're already planning to rip it apart. I heard them talking when they thought I was asleep. They want to flip it, turn it into another hollow project. But you and I both know this place is more than wood and nails. Keep it, or don't, but make the choice on your own terms. You're more than what they told you. Love always. Grandma Evelyn. I cried. Not the loud, heaving kind. Just quiet tears slipping down my face, hot and sharp, as if every word had peeled back a layer of armor I didn't realize I'd worn for years. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. The next morning, I found them still here. I walked out to the gravel driveway, coffee mug in hand, only to see Rachel pacing near her truck with a Bluetooth earpiece and a binder full of glossy brochures. My parents stood nearby, both looking exhausted but tense, like coiled springs. When Rachel noticed me, she clicked off the call and waved the binder. "Okay, so here's the thing," she said brightly. "We've been thinking, and there's actually a really smart way we can all benefit from this. You're obviously the owner now, which is great. Unexpected, but great. And instead of letting this place just sit here, you could let us handle the renovations. We front the costs, manage the logistics, and then we split the profits from rentals." I sipped my coffee. She kept going. "It's win-win. You don't lift a finger. We already have the contacts. The contractor I was talking to, he's ready to start next week. It'll be high-end, rustic luxury. Think quartz counters, exposed beams, maybe a sauna." My father chimed in. "You're not exactly in a position to handle a property this size, Cole. You've got, what, a one-bedroom apartment and a job at a bookstore." He said it like it was a crime. My mother offered a smile like she was trying out empathy for the first time. "We just don't want you to feel overwhelmed. Your grandmother was sentimental. This place might feel like a burden more than a blessing." Rachel stepped forward, flipping to a page in the binder. "Look, here's a breakdown of projected revenue. We're talking 6 figures within the first year." They thought they were being generous. They thought they were helping. But I saw it for what it was, a setup. A way to rope me in, to make me dependent, and then slowly edge me out once the paperwork was signed. They'd done it before, with my uncle's estate, with my cousin's old business. Smiling while planting knives. I nodded slowly. "Thanks for the offer." They all straightened a little. Hopeful. But no. The word hung in the air like a guillotine. Rachel blinked. "Excuse me. I'm not selling. I'm not flipping. And I'm definitely not handing it over to the people who cut me out of their lives and only showed up again when there was real estate involved." My mother flinched. My father's face hardened. Rachel laughed. "Come on. You really think you can manage this on your own?" "I think I'll figure it out," I said. "I always do." They started to argue about logistics, about family legacy, about throwing away opportunity. But I'd stopped listening. I was already walking back inside, letting the door creak shut behind me. They didn't leave right away. They lingered. And later that day, I found out why. Because they weren't done yet. And neither was I. They didn't leave that day. I half expected them to pack up their brochures, their fake smiles, their passive-aggressive guilt trips, and drive down the mountain, muttering about ungrateful children. But no, they stayed. Claimed they were just tying up loose ends and mourning in their own way. But something about the way they kept circling the cabin, talking in hushed tones, taking phone calls just out of earshot, put me on edge. By the third day, I was watching them through the window like I was in some kind of wilderness thriller. My father spent his mornings pacing near the tree line, probably debating how to spin the situation into something salvageable. My mother floated in and out of rooms inside the cabin like a ghost, touching things that didn't belong to her. Grandma's quilt, her birdhouse collection, the chip tea set we'd used every winter. Rachel, meanwhile, was still glued to her phone, typing furiously, stopping only to take selfies near the fireplace. I caught her recording a video once. She was holding the wolf folder like a prop, smiling as she whispered something about family heritage. On the 4th morning, I found the front door wide open. I was up early, earlier than usual, thanks to a storm that had rattled the windows all night. The fireplace had gone out, and the cabin was cold enough to see my breath. I got up, groggy, still half asleep, and stumbled out of bed to make coffee. But when I walked into the living room, something felt off. The door, wide open, cold air pouring in, pine needles scattered across the floor. I stepped outside barefoot and looked around. The cars were still in the driveway. No signs of forced entry. No wildlife tracks. But something felt wrong. I checked the side shed. Nothing missing. I checked the back door. Still locked. Then I opened the door to Grandma's old office. And my heart dropped. The safe was open. Not just open, emptied. I didn't even know the combination. Grandma had always said it was for important things, but she never told me what those were. I figured it was old photos, maybe her wedding ring, maybe a few bonds or sentimental heirlooms. It had been locked the entire time I'd been there, tucked behind a bookshelf, hidden in plain sight. But now the bookshelf had been moved. The rug crumpled. The frame on the wall above it slightly crooked. Someone had gone digging. And they found it. I confronted them after breakfast. I didn't lead with accusations. I didn't scream. I just asked, casually, "Anyone know what happened to the safe?" The silence that followed told me everything. Rachel didn't even look up from her eggs. Safe. My mother frowned. Your grandmother had a safe? My father didn't answer. He reached for his coffee like he hadn't heard the question. I stared at them one by one. It was in her office, behind the bookshelf. It's been emptied. Rachel blinked. Well, maybe she emptied it before she passed. Funny, I said, because I found the lock mechanism pried open. That made my mother twitch. Whoever opened it didn't know the combination. They forced it, and judging by the scratches and the broken lock pin, it happened recently. Still, they said nothing. So I said it for them. Which one of you did it? My father stood slowly. You're being paranoid. No, I said. I'm being observant. The safe was untouched until yesterday. Now it's empty. The only people who've been in and out of the cabin are you three. So again, who opened the safe? Rachel scoffed. You're acting like it's a crime. Maybe she left something in there for all of us. Ever think of that? Maybe she did, I said. But she didn't leave it to you. They didn't like that. My father leaned forward, voice low. That woman was nearly blind by the end. Half the time she called me by her dead brother's name. You think she was of sound mind when she wrote you into her will? She passed 2 screenings, I said flatly. Then she was manipulated. I stared at him. By who? The grandson she hadn't seen in months? Or the son and daughter-in-law she lived next door to? He didn't answer, but I could see the frustration behind his eyes. This wasn't going how he wanted. They came here expecting to sweep in, take what they assumed was theirs, and be gone before the dust settled. Now they were trapped. On land they didn't own. In a cabin they didn't inherit. And their golden opportunity, whatever they'd stolen from that safe, was all they had left. That night, I made a decision. I installed a camera. Nothing fancy. Just an old trail cam Grandma used to monitor the deer. I mounted it inside the bookshelf, aimed at the office door. If they came back, I'd know. Then I locked the door. The next morning, the door was ajar again, and the safe was still empty. But the bookshelf? The camera was gone. I didn't confront them this time. I waited, watched, took notes. They were up to something. The way Rachel kept ducking into town. The way my father started writing things down in a little leather notebook. The way my mother kept asking about paperwork. Do you even have the deed yet? Shouldn't you transfer it to your name? What if squatters move in after you leave? They were trying to find a loophole, trying to shake the foundation, trying to make me doubt. It almost worked. Until Garrett called. Cole, he said. I just got a very interesting phone call. From who? From a realtor. She said she's representing your parents in a potential sale of the cabin. Asked for confirmation on zoning and title transfer. She even sent a tentative property listing. I felt cold all over. They're trying to sell the cabin? I said. Without your signature, they can't. But they're shopping it. Talking to buyers. Floating numbers. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's bold. Even for them. I can file a cease and desist, Garrett said. But it's probably time we file the deed in your name officially. Probate cleared. Everything's in order. We just need your signature. I told him I'd be there by morning. But it was already too late. Because while I was on the phone, my parents were in the office. Not the main one. Grandma's second office. The one in the attic. I didn't even remember it existed until I heard a noise above me. Slow, creaking footsteps directly over the living room. The attic stairs were old and tucked behind a closet door, barely visible unless you knew where to look. I opened it quietly, climbed each step like it might collapse under me. And there they were. My mother, flashlight in hand. Rachel, going through boxes. My father, kneeling beside a stack of file cabinets with a crowbar. They didn't see me at first. I watched them pick through her life. Her letters. Her bank statements. Her property tax filings. Did you seriously think she wouldn't keep a backup copy? Rachel whispered. She was paranoid. There's got to be something up here. A note. An addendum. Anything we can use. I don't care if we have to forge it, my father muttered. All we need is something with a signature. That's when I stepped forward. And the floor creaked. 3 heads whipped around. They froze. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just said 2 words. Get out. Rachel opened her mouth, probably to spin some story about how they were preserving family memories. My mother looked like she might cry. My father, God help him, stood up like he was the one owed an explanation. We have a right. No, I said. You had a right. And you burned it. He pointed a finger at me. You don't know what's at stake here. I do now, I said. You're thieves. My mother finally spoke. Cole, please, don't do this. We're your family. We made mistakes, sure, but this isn't how it has to go. You kicked me out at 19, I said quietly. You didn't call. You didn't write. You didn't care if I lived or died. That's not true, she whispered. I lived out of my car for 3 months. Silence. Rachel muttered something about dramatic flair. My father stepped forward again. You want to throw it all away over a grudge? No, I said. I want you out by sunset. And if we don't, I smiled. I'll call the sheriff. Tell him about the safe, the attempted forgery, the theft, the illegal listing. I'll give him the names of every buyer you contacted, every appraiser you sent photos to. They were dead silent. Then I added one last thing. And I'll make sure the story gets out. Every person in this town loved Grandma. They trusted her. Imagine how they'll feel when they hear her son looted her cabin before the body was cold. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Real or not, I didn't care. They left that afternoon. But what they left behind, that's what changed everything. Because when I cleaned out the attic, I found something they missed. A hidden compartment in the floorboards. Inside was a manila envelope. And the document inside was the real bombshell. I didn't open the envelope right away. There was something about it. The way it had been hidden under the floorboards, sealed with wax, my name written in the corner in fading blue ink, that made my hands shake just holding it. I placed it on the old writing desk in the attic and sat there for what felt like hours, the sun crawling across the floor, casting long shadows from the rafters. I don't know what I was expecting. Another letter? A deed to a second property? A posthumous confession? What I didn't expect was what I found. Inside was a thick document, folded twice and stapled at the corner. The top page was official-looking, with a gold notary seal and Grandma's signature at the bottom. It was dated nearly 2 years ago, about 6 months before her final will. It was a revocation, a formal document canceling a previous draft of her will, one that, according to the line item on page 3, had left everything, the cabin, the land, her assets, to my father. Everything. Every square inch, every item on the property, the bank account attached to the property taxes, all of it. She'd revoked it and replaced it with the will Garrett had read aloud. That much I already knew. But what crushed me was what came next. Folded between the pages was a smaller note. It wasn't long, just a few lines, handwritten in the same shaky scrawl I remembered from her last few letters. I didn't want to do this. I waited. I gave him every chance to change. But he's still the same scared boy, hiding behind anger. I won't let him hurt you again, Cole. This is the only way I know how to protect you now. I felt something inside me crack open. It wasn't pride. It wasn't relief. It was grief, the kind I hadn't allowed myself to feel at her funeral, or when Garrett read her will, or even when I'd watched my father lie through his teeth just days earlier. This wasn't just about property. It never had been. This was about love, about hurt, about the kind of betrayal that festers for decades, passed down like bad genetics. And here was proof, undeniable, irreversible, that she'd chosen me. Not because I deserved it more, or because I asked for it, but because she saw who my father truly was and decided to break the cycle. But even with that knowledge, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow, because at the end of the day, this wasn't just my win. It was also her loss. She'd spent the last years of her life watching her son turn into a man she didn't recognize. She must have felt so alone, so disillusioned. And now she was gone, and all I had left were ashes and signatures and silence. I stayed in the attic until the sun went down. Then I walked out onto the porch, sat in Grandma's rocking chair, and watched the stars come out one by one. The fallout came quickly. Garrett filed the final deed paperwork, officially transferring the property into my name. He also contacted the sheriff about the break-in. Nothing came of it. No charges were filed, but the message was clear. Stay away. My parents didn't. At first, it was subtle. Rachel sent me a passive-aggressive text. Hope you're enjoying playing King of the Hill. Just remember, what goes up. My father left a voicemail I didn't return. Cole, I don't know what kind of lies she fed you, but this isn't over. That land was meant for the family. My mother emailed me a photo of the cabin from 20 years ago. No caption. I ignored all of it. Until the mailbox incident. I'd driven into town to pick up some supplies, tools, food, a new space heater to replace the one in Grandma's room. And when I came back, the mailbox was gone. Ripped from the post. It wasn't stolen. Just destroyed. Flattened in the ditch. I replaced it. 2 days later, someone slashed my back tires. I called the sheriff. Filed a report. Nothing happened. No witnesses. No camera footage. Still, I didn't retaliate. Not because I was afraid, but because I was done playing their game. That winter was the hardest I've ever lived through. The snow hit early, mid-November, and didn't let up until March. The cabin, beautiful as it was, wasn't made for long-term isolation. The heating system groaned. The roof leaked near the chimney. The pipes froze twice. I chopped wood until my hands blistered, cooked meals on a stove that hissed when it got too hot, and kept my phone on low-power mode just in case the generator gave out. It was peaceful and brutal. There were days I didn't speak to another human. Days I thought about leaving, selling the place, starting over somewhere warm, with Wi-Fi and neighbors and takeout. Somewhere the ghosts didn't sit on every shelf. But every time I reached that breaking point, something stopped me. Sometimes it was a memory. Grandma teaching me how to make cornbread, humming Patsy Cline while dusting the windowsills, sitting beside me on the dock in total silence. Sometimes it was something I found. An old postcard from the 1950s tucked into a book, a half-finished quilt under the bed, a fishing lure wrapped in tissue paper labeled Cole's first catch. Sometimes it was just the wind through the trees, whispering like it was trying to say, "You're not alone." I started fixing things, not just out of necessity, but because it gave me purpose. I recaulked the windows, reinforced the roof, repaired the steps on the front porch. Each nail I drove in felt like a reclaiming of space, of history, of myself. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. Just thoughts, ideas, snippets of conversations I imagined having if Grandma were still here. I wrote her a letter, then another, then a whole notebook full of them. And slowly, something shifted. The bitterness began to drain away. Not all at once, not in some dramatic movie montage, but piece by piece. I stopped checking my phone every morning for another snide message. I stopped thinking about my father's face when he realized he'd been cut out. I stopped fantasizing about revenge or vindication or some final confrontation where I got the last word. I didn't want the last word. I wanted peace. Then, one day in late February, I found a business card wedged into the screen door. No note, just a name, number, and logo. A realty group, the same one Garrett had mentioned. I called the number, out of curiosity. The woman on the other end answered quickly. "Oh, Cole, you're that." She paused. "Sorry, we've been expecting your call." "Why?" I asked. She hesitated. "Your father told us you'd be reaching out to finalize the sale." My throat went dry. "I'm not selling," I said. Silence. "I see," she said finally. "Well, that's disappointing." He was very convincing. "Yeah," I said. "He usually is." I hung up before she could say anything else. And for the first time in weeks, I felt angry again. Not the wildfire rage from before. This was colder. Focused. They weren't done. Even now, months later, they were still trying to undermine me. Still making calls. Still telling stories. Still trying to wrestle the narrative back into their control. They thought I was isolated. Vulnerable. Alone. They were wrong. I drove down the mountain the next day. Went to the county office. Filed every piece of paperwork I needed. Had the property boundaries resurveyed. Applied for a private mailbox. Ordered a P.O. box in town. Filed a police report for the destroyed one. Then I called Garrett. "Can you help me write a formal cease and desist?" I asked. I want it sent to all three of them. No more contact. No more visits. No more pretending this is their property. I want a paper trail. He agreed. Then I asked him one more question. What would it take to set up a trust? One they can't touch. One that keeps this place safe, even if something happens to me. He paused. Honestly, not much. But, Cole, are you sure you want to do that? It's a big step. I'm sure. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't. They hadn't broken me. They'd only shown me exactly who they were. And in doing so, they'd freed me from ever needing them again. It started with an email. A local journalist, her name was Marla Jenkins, reached out in early spring. Said she'd heard about the family drama up by the old McAllister cabin and wanted to talk. I almost deleted it. I wasn't interested in turning my grief into a headline. But something about the way she wrote, curious, not exploitative, made me pause. She'd grown up in the area. Said she remembered my grandmother from her church days, remembered her garden, the rhubarb pies she used to bring to the county bake-offs. Marla hadn't seen Evelyn in years, but she'd heard whispers after the funeral. There's talk going around town, she wrote, that your family's trying to flip the place, even though you inherited it. I replied with one line. They tried. She asked if we could meet. I agreed, reluctantly. We sat on a bench outside the library, 2 thermoses of lukewarm coffee between us. I kept it surface level at first. Told her the short version. Kicked out at 19, went no contact, stayed in touch with my grandmother. She left me the cabin, and suddenly everyone remembered I existed. But Marla wasn't just after gossip. She asked questions that no one else had. Questions about what it felt like to live there now, what I remembered from childhood summers, whether the land still felt haunted, or if it had finally started to feel like mine. That stuck with me. Did it feel like mine yet? I wasn't sure. But something shifted after that conversation. Maybe it was saying it out loud. Maybe it was being seen by someone who didn't have an agenda. But I went home that night and stood on the dock and looked out across the lake and realized it wasn't just where I lived now. It was home. I started a project. It wasn't planned or polished or profitable. It just happened. It began with a single post on an old forum dedicated to historical restoration. I asked a few questions about restoring hand-cut logs, preserving original hardware, insulating stone foundations. Someone replied. Then someone else. Then someone messaged me directly and asked if I'd document my progress. So I did. I made a blog. Simple layout. No ads. Just photos and journal-style updates. I called it Second Foundation, after something Grandma once said when I was helping her replant her flower beds. Sometimes the best way to save something is to rebuild it from where it fell apart. At first, no one read it except a handful of restoration hobbyists. But word spread. People started sharing it. First local folks, curious about the McAllister grandson. Then strangers, history buffs, DIY enthusiasts, people who wanted to believe that broken things could be made beautiful again. By early summer, the blog had a few thousand subscribers. Then 10,000. Then 20. I got an email from a producer at a small streaming network that specialized in slow living and homestead documentaries. She said my story was quietly powerful and wanted to know if I'd consider filming a limited series about restoring the cabin. I said no at first. Then I said yes. Not for the attention. For Grandma. For the woman who never had much but made do with everything she had. For the woman who gave me the only home I'd ever felt safe in. For the woman who fought her own son to give me a chance. I wanted to show the world what she left behind and what I was building on top of it. Filming started in June. A small crew came up once a month. 2 cameramen, a director, a field producer. They stayed in a nearby motel and followed me around while I repaired the front porch, dug out the old cellar, restored the antique stove, and rebuilt the greenhouse that had collapsed in the 90s. They asked me questions. About the cabin. About my life. About forgiveness. I didn't answer all of them, but I said enough. The show premiered that fall. It was called Rebound. It didn't go viral. It didn't break records. But it resonated. People reached out from all over. Some shared stories of estrangement. Some asked about restoration tips. Some just said thank you. That meant more than the rest. Then came the inheritance my grandmother never told me about. Garrett called again in early October. Do you remember your great-aunt Sylvia? I didn't. She was Evelyn's older sister. Lived in Oregon. Never married. Never had kids. She and your grandmother had a falling out in the 70s and didn't speak again. She passed away earlier this year. No, Will. You're the next legal heir through Evelyn. I blinked. To what? He cleared his throat. A house. A small one. And about 200 acres of undeveloped land. My jaw dropped. I flew out to see it a month later. The house was nothing to look at. Weathered, empty, barely standing. But the land? Rolling hills, a dense forest, a small creek that wound through the back corner like a silver ribbon. I didn't know what to do with it at first. Then I remembered something Grandma told me once. If you ever get a chance to leave something behind that makes the world softer, take it. So I did. I donated part of the land to a conservation trust. Built a small cabin on another part with reclaimed wood and local stone. Started hosting workshops. Tiny, weekend-long gatherings for people who'd read the blog and wanted to learn how to start over. It became a place for healing. Not just for me. For others like me. People with broken families. People who'd been forgotten. People rebuilding from nothing. We shared stories around a fire pit and taught each other how to mend things with our hands. It was simple, and it was enough. The funny thing about healing is that it makes you see clearly. And once I had distance, real distance, I started to see my parents for who they really were. Not just villains, not just cold-hearted manipulators, but scared, flawed people clinging to a version of life they could control. I wasn't ready to forgive them. I might never be, but I didn't hate them anymore. I just let go. Stopped checking their profiles. Stopped wondering if they were watching the show, reading the blog, hearing about the land. They probably were. That was fine. Let them see. Let them stew. Because I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I had something better. The cabin was finished in late November. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. The original logs were still there, dark and sturdy. The new windows let in just enough light. The fireplace crackled the way it used to when Grandma would sit with her tea and knit in silence. I stood on the front porch that night, snow just beginning to fall, and realized I hadn't felt afraid in months. Not of them. Not of failure. Not of being alone. Because I wasn't. Not really. I had the cabin. I had the land. I had a life built from the ashes of what they tried to destroy. And I had one more thing. A plan. Because while I wasn't chasing revenge anymore, that didn't mean I wasn't prepared for what came next. I learned quickly that the most satisfying revenge isn't loud. It's surgical. It's the slow, patient stacking of facts until there isn't a story your enemies can hide behind. By the time I started planning, I had things they didn't. A small but growing audience who cared about Grandma and the cabin. A producer who owed me favors. Garrett with a lawyer's calmness. And a county clerk who was tired of the rumor mill and liked neat paperwork. The trick was to turn every one of their moves into a public, documented thing. One that couldn't be spun into family disagreement or misunderstanding. Step 1 was evidence. The crew had kept more footage than I expected. Between formal shoots and the off-camera b-roll, they'd recorded hours of us walking the property, interviews, and, crucially, random clips from days Rachel and my parents were around. I asked quietly if the production team could comb through anything from the week of the funeral. They did more than that. The field producer called me the next day, voice low and excited. "We found something," she said. "You should see this." There it was, grainy footage from the day I'd left the attic, accidentally filmed because a camera had been left rolling in the hallway. For 40 seconds, the clip shows my father moving the bookshelf, Rachel rifling through boxes with an obvious sense of purpose, my mother hovering like a lookout. In another clip, this one from a cameraman who'd been nosy and saved a copy, there's a close-up of a crowbar and a hand trying to jimmy a lock. Not the clearest film in the world, but paired with my note about the broken safe and Garrett's inventory lists, it was damning. The crew handed copies to me and to Marla. Step 2 was official. Garrett filed a formal complaint with the sheriff's office, supplied the footage, the photographs of the Pride lock, the notarized will and the revocation documents we'd found in the attic, and the timeline proving my parents were on the property when the safe was opened. He also drafted a concise cease and desist and sent it certified mail. No more visits, no more attempts to list the property, and a warning that any attempted sale would be met with immediate legal action. Garrett had a way with words that made threats sound boring and inevitable. That helped. Step 3 was public. Marla agreed to write an exposé, but she didn't want it sensational. She wanted it to look like reporting. She ran the title past me. How a mountain cabin became the center of a family's feud. The piece included the footage, quotes from the neighbors who'd seen late-night vans and unfamiliar contractors circling the property listing screenshots my parents had floated to the realtor, and Garrett's explanation of the legal chain of custody of the will. When it went live, the local Facebook groups lit up. People who remembered Grandma called the paper. One neighbor I'd barely spoken to before brought over an envelope with text messages he'd recorded. Rachel had been bragging to a friend about getting things set up, and even mentioned the attic. That friend sent the screenshots to Marla. I didn't ask for public pity. I wanted the truth on record. And I wanted the kind of pressure that makes people with greedy plans shrink away. Scrutiny. Within 48 hours of the article, the realtor who'd been talking to my parents backed off and sent a terse email saying they wouldn't list the property without clear, uncontested title. The contractor who'd been quoted in Rachel's binder called Garrett and said he wouldn't be involved in any family business where clients lied about ownership. Even the local historical society put a polite hold on any permits to change the property without a review, something I gently encouraged them to do, knowing any permit would require affidavits from all interested parties. I also used the show and blog. In the next episode of the miniseries, The producer let me run a short segment where I talked about stewardship and respect. Nothing accusatory, just values. Then, at the end of the episode, they played 20 seconds of the attic footage with the crowbar. I didn't speak over it. Few words, sometimes, are more damning than images and the quiet sound of someone searching through someone else's life. That was the setup. It let the law do its work and let the town weigh in without me having to shout. People started calling my parents. Not to berate them, mostly to ask basic questions like, "Are you sure you own the cabin? And did you have the right to be in the attic?" That social pressure gnawed at them. My mother's old friend stopped answering her calls. Rachel's Instagram comments turned from polite curiosity to sharp, blunt questions. The moral center of our little valley had turned their attention toward who was behaving decently and who wasn't. The payoff wasn't theatrical. It was quiet and perfect. One cool Thursday, I sat at my desk and sent a single email to 3 addresses: my parents, Rachel, and the realtor who'd been their contact. Subject line: public notice and invitation. The body was short and clinical. I attached copies of the attic footage, the police report number, the cease and desist, and the county's confirmation of completed transfer of title to my name. I ended the email with one line: "If anyone would like to discuss this, we'll be holding a public, mediated meeting at the community hall next Thursday at 6 p.m. The local paper, the county clerk, and a mediator will be present. If you do not attend, your concerns will be aired in public record. No private settlements will be accepted after that date." I didn't bait them. I simply set the terms where their only options were to either face the facts in public or walk away in shame. The next week my inbox filled with predictable things: tepid appeals to family, a passive-aggressive threat from my father about making grandma's legacy miserable, and, most telling, a lawyer's letter from a small firm claiming to represent Rachel. Garrett and I read it and shrugged. They were all flailing. What I hadn't expected was how calm it all felt for me. I slept easier. I walked the land without checking my rear view. I let the process breathe and the system take care of the rest. That, more than anything, was the revenge I'd wanted, to no longer have their chaos define my life. 2 days before the meeting, Marla asked if she could run a follow-up piece announcing the mediation and quoting the cease and desist. The article went online late at night. By morning, the whole valley knew there'd be a hearing. Neighbors RSVP'd. 2 of Grandma's old church ladies said they'd bring pies. The Historical Society promised to send a representative. The sheriff, who was more embarrassed than righteous, confirmed he'd have an officer present for safety. On the day, I walked into the community hall carrying 2 thermoses, my notepad, and the envelope with Grandma's letter. The room smelled vaguely of donuts and pine cleaner. People whispered when I passed. My parents arrived last, late, smoothed their coats, and sat at the back like accused actors waiting for their cue. The mediator introduced herself, polite, efficient, asked everyone to state their names. I spoke, even though Garrett could have done it for me. "Cole McAllister," I said. "I'm here to ensure the wishes of Evelyn McAllister are respected." My voice was steady. The room nodded. Cameras were set up in the back, but they were small, respectful local outlets, no national circus. My father stood when it came to him, voice shaky at first. He stumbled through a version of events that tried to paint him as a dutiful son who had only ever wanted to honor his mother. Rachel's lawyer made a perfunctory argument about family rights and uncertain capacity, but Garrett had already preempted that with the cognitive evaluations and the notarized documents. The mediator asked for specifics. Garrett presented them. The sheriff confirmed the complaint. Marla's recorder clicked softly. Midway through, my mother began to cry. Not the dramatic, performative cry she'd practiced for me in the past, but a small, raw thing that made a few people in the front row glance away. She asked if she could speak. The mediator nodded. She looked at me and said, "Cole, I never meant to." Then her voice caught. The room was quiet. Everyone leaned in. Even my father's shoulders seemed to slump. That was when my phone buzzed. A new email. From an address I didn't recognize. Subject: "You'll want to hear this before you speak." I glanced at Garrett. He did the same. I opened it. Inside was a short audio file. It had been recorded the night the attic was rifled through, the one I'd stumbled upon. The file had been sent by someone who'd been staying at the motel Rachel used, an offhand third party who'd heard a private conversation and shared it when they realized what it meant. The voice on the recording was unmistakable. My father, speaking in a tone I'd heard 100 times, speaking about money, getting what was ours, and a line that made my skin go cold. Evelyn's signature won't hold if we can show she wasn't of sound mind. We'll just find an old draft, or make one. It'll be cleaner that way. The mediator's clipboard lay forgotten. My mother's face went white. My father's jaw tightened like a clamp. Rachel's attorney paled. I hit play again. The room heard everything. People shifted. A murmur rose. The mediator closed her notebook slowly and said, "I think we need to pause. The sheriff should review this." My parents looked at me then. Anger, fear, calculation all layered on one another. They had one last, frantic thing they could try to do. Claim character, claim sorrow, claim the messy complexity of family. They could try and spin, plead, beg. And they would. But the recording had changed the rules. It moved this from family disagreement into the territory of proof. My heart hammered, less with adrenaline and more with a steady, cold certainty. I'd wanted them stopped, exposed, held accountable. I hadn't wanted humiliation for the sake of it. I wanted a clean field where the cabin could breathe and where Grandma's choices would stand. Outside, the winter sun slanted low. Inside, my mother started to stammer an apology. My father opened his mouth to speak. At that exact moment, the hall doors burst open and someone rushed in, breathless, face flushed from the cold. Heads turned. I looked up and froze, because the person at the door was not a neighbor, not a reporter, not the sheriff. It was someone I hadn't expected to see at all. The person standing at the door was Lily, my sister, half-sister, technically. I hadn't seen her since I was 15. She was younger than me by 5 years, quiet, awkward, always walking on eggshells around our father. Back then, she'd been the ghost of the house, present, but never spoken to unless she was needed for a chore or to back up a lie. I left at 19 and never looked back. She stayed, and then vanished. But here she was, taller, sharper, different, but not. Same eyes, same nervous energy. Her coat was damp from snow. Her breath came fast, like she'd run the last mile. She stood in the doorway, frozen as the whole room turned toward her. She looked straight at me, then at our parents, then back to me. "I have something to say," she said, breathless. The mediator blinked, clearly thrown. "Your name?" "Lily McAllister." My father's face dropped. Pale, then red. "Lily, don't." But she walked past him like he didn't exist. Marla was already moving her recorder closer. Garrett leaned forward, lips pressed in a line. And I just stared, unsure if I was still breathing. Lily stopped beside the center table. She was shaking, shoulders tight, fists clenched, but her voice was steady. "I lived with them after Cole left," she said, voice thin but clear. "I know what they did." My mother gasped. My father stepped forward. "Lily, no." But it was too late. "I heard them talk about forging a will," she said. "Back in January, before Grandma died. I thought they were joking at first. But then Rachel started bringing over samples of old paperwork, trying to find signatures that matched. They said Cole didn't deserve the cabin, that he'd probably sell it or let it rot. She pulled a small envelope from her pocket. "I saved this. I didn't know what to do with it. But I found it in Rachel's car after she left one night. A draft of a will with Grandma's name typed on it. Not signed. Dated wrong. It didn't match the real one." She handed it to the mediator. Silence. Total, absolute silence. Until my father finally exploded. "This is absurd," he barked. "You're just trying to what? Get in Cole's good graces? You think he's going to share it with you? You think?" "Be quiet," Lily said. Soft, but final. He stopped cold. And I saw it then. Not just anger. Not just betrayal. Fear. The walls were closing in. I don't remember the rest of the meeting word for word. Just the feel of it. Like a weight being lifted off my chest in slow, satisfying increments. The mediator excused my parents from the room. The sheriff escorted them outside. Marla asked Lily for an interview. Garrett whispered something about escalation, criminal fraud, and revocation of parental credibility in future claims. I walked out into the cold, stunned. Lily followed. We stood in the parking lot for a long moment before I found words. "Why now?" She gave a small, sad smile. "Because I watched them try to bury you. And then I watched you rise. And I realized I didn't want to be part of their silence anymore." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You still talk to them?" She shook her head. "Not anymore." Then she looked up at the cabin in the distance, nestled between trees and snow and quiet sky. Is it really as peaceful up there as it looks? I smiled. Come see for yourself. A month later, I hosted the first winter gathering at the cabin. Small group, 10 people. A wood stove, hot soup, old music playing from a radio. Lily came, stayed in the loft room Grandma used to use for guests. She helped me mend curtains, fix a loose stair, paint the trim. We didn't talk about the past much. We didn't need to. One night, sitting by the fire, she turned to me and said, I think she knew. About all of it. I think she was waiting for us to find each other again. I didn't answer, but I looked out across the room at the picture of Grandma on the mantel, smiling, hands folded, hair wild and gray, and I swore she smiled back. The investigation into the forgery attempt stalled after a few months. No hard proof of signatures used, no physical break-in, but it didn't matter. My parents were finished. The community had turned its back on them. Rachel's marketing job quietly disappeared. My father resigned from the community board. My mother moved to Arizona. No one threw stones. But no one opened their doors either. They were forgotten. And I was finally free. The cabin still stands. The blog lives on. The workshops are full. And every now and then, when the fire's low and the night's quiet, I take out Grandma's letter, the first one, and read it again. You're more than what they told you. She was right. I am. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure no one ever forgets her for that. Or me. I've always been the one who did everything right. I worked hard, kept my head down, and did what I was supposed to. But no matter how much I tried, I was never quite good enough in my family's eyes. My sister, Lisa, on the other hand, seemed to have everything handed to her. She was always the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. Lisa and I were close growing up, or at least I thought we were. But as we got older, things started to shift. I noticed that every family event, every holiday, every celebration, she was the one getting all the attention. She was the one who could do no wrong, while I was the one who seemed to always be in trouble, always disappointing someone. It wasn't that I was a troublemaker. I wasn't. But if anything went wrong, I was always the first to take the blame. Lisa never had to deal with that. In fact, she didn't seem to deal with anything at all. Life came easy to her, while I was stuck constantly trying to prove myself. So, when she asked if she could move in with me for a while, I should have seen it as a red flag. But I didn't. I felt like this was my chance to have some real sister time. Maybe, just maybe, if I helped her out, she'd realize how much I'd been there for her all these years. First, it wasn't that bad. Lisa was only supposed to stay with me for a couple of months while she looked for a place of her own. I didn't mind. After all, she was my sister, and family should stick together, right? But then, things started to change. She'd leave for work in the morning, but I'd come home after a long day to find the apartment a mess. Dirty dishes everywhere, her shoes scattered across the living room, and her clothes left in piles on the couch. She didn't even bother to clean up after herself. And when I asked her about it, she would just shrug it off, saying she was tired or had too much going on. I tried to keep my cool. After all, I didn't want to start a fight. But deep down, I was starting to resent the situation. She was living with me rent-free, taking up space, and it felt like she wasn't even trying. Meanwhile, I was struggling to make ends meet. I had my own bills to pay, my own life to juggle, and here she was, treating my home like a hotel. It didn't help that our parents seemed to ignore the issue entirely. They were just so happy that Lisa was living with me. They didn't understand how much I was giving up to make this work. They didn't see the resentment building inside me, the frustration that kept growing every day. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, I came home to find Lisa sprawled out on the couch, watching TV, with half a pizza box beside her. She hadn't even bothered to clean up. I could feel my blood boiling, but I didn't say anything right away. I was tired of being the bad guy, but then she said it. Oh, hey, by the way, Mom and Dad want me to stay a little longer. They're fine with it, so I figured I could just crash here for another few months. I froze. Another few months? I had already given her a place to stay for over 4 months. My patience was running thin, and now it felt like my own family was taking advantage of me. I couldn't just sit back and let them push me around anymore. The truth was, I was tired. Tired of always being the one to sacrifice. Tired of always being the one to give in. It wasn't fair. I was working my butt off just to get by, and Lisa was living here rent-free, without a care in the world. That night, after she went to bed, I sat down and started thinking. This wasn't just about the mess or the lack of respect. It was about everything. The years of feeling like I wasn't enough, the way my family always took Lisa's side no matter what. They had never been there for me like they had been for her. And now, here I was, supporting her again, and it felt like nothing had changed. I had to make a decision. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had to change. I couldn't keep going like this, feeling invisible in my own home, feeling like I was being taken advantage of. I had put up with Lisa living here for months, all while trying to maintain my own life. But it wasn't fair anymore. After work, I walked into the apartment, and there she was, lounging on the couch again. I didn't even get a hello. It was like she didn't care that I had a long day. She didn't care about anything, really, except her own comfort. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Lisa, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She glanced up at me, eyes still glued to the screen. "What's up?" She sounded so casual, so unbothered. "I'm not going to keep doing this. You need to move out. You've been here long enough, and I'm not going to let you stay here rent-free anymore," I said, my voice a bit more forceful than I intended. She blinked in surprise, then let out a little laugh. "What? Are you serious? You want me to leave?" "Yes. You've been here long enough, and I've asked you to pitch in, but you don't. You don't clean up, you don't respect the space. And I'm struggling to pay bills while you get to live here without a care in the world. I've had enough." For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stared at me, her eyes narrowing. And then, in that casual way of hers, she said, "Well, you don't have to be so dramatic about it. I was just going to stay a little longer until I figured things out." "No, you weren't. You were planning to stay as long as you could. You're taking advantage of me, and I won't let you do that anymore." I couldn't believe I was saying it. This wasn't the sister I used to know. This was someone who thought they could walk all over me without any consequences. She stood up then, a little too quickly, and snapped, "I'm not some charity case, okay? I'm just trying to get my life together. Why do you have to make everything so difficult?" "I'm not making things difficult. You are," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I've been nothing but patient, but you've crossed the line. It's time for you to leave." Her face twisted in disbelief, and then it hit me. She had never once thought she'd have to leave. My sister had always been able to depend on others. Mom and Dad had always had her back, and now I was supposed to just keep supporting her like this. She let out a huff of frustration and grabbed her phone, then called Mom. I knew exactly what was coming. Mom would try to talk me out of it, tell me I was being harsh, and beg me to let Lisa stay longer. When she hung up, Lisa's face was red with anger. "Mom said I should talk to you about this. You're being unreasonable." "Unreasonable?" I was fighting to stay calm. "No, I've been patient. I've tried, but I'm done. You need to figure it out on your own. You can't keep relying on other people." She stood there for a moment, seething. I saw her calculating her next move, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. The next few days were tense. Lisa barely spoke to me, and I could feel the walls closing in. I knew she was hurt, but honestly, I didn't care. The anger I had been bottling up for so long was finally starting to surface. I was tired of being the one who always gave in. And then, it happened. Mom and Dad called. I didn't answer at first. I wasn't in the mood to listen to their guilt trip. But after a few missed calls, I decided to pick up. "Why are you doing this?" Mom's voice was soft, but I could hear the disappointment. "Lisa just needs some help right now. She's going through a tough time." I was silent for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. "You've always taken her side, haven't you? No matter what. She's your perfect little girl, and I'm just the other one. The one you don't have time for." "That's not true, honey. You know we love you. But Lisa needs us right now, and you're being hard on her." "I've been hard on her for years, Mom. But she's never had to face the consequences of her actions. She doesn't clean up after herself. She doesn't pay rent. And yet she gets everything handed to her while I'm left to pick up the pieces. I'm done being the one who sacrifices everything." Mom sighed, clearly frustrated. "We're just asking for a little more patience. Can't you be more understanding?" "I've been patient long enough. I can't keep doing this." I'm kicking her out. She needs to learn how to stand on her own feet. The phone went silent for a long moment, and when Mom spoke again, it was almost like she was pleading with me. Please don't do this. We're family. Don't turn your back on your sister. I'm not turning my back on her. I'm doing what's best for both of us. I hung up before I could hear more of her excuses. I didn't need to hear them. I was done. The days that followed were a blur of tension and frustration. Lisa barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was always some snarky comment or a backhanded remark. The calm I had once tried to maintain was now gone. I could feel the strain between us, and honestly, I didn't know how much longer I could take it. Then, one afternoon, she caught me in the kitchen, staring at the pile of bills I was trying to sort through. She stood there for a moment, watching me as I jotted down numbers, balancing accounts, trying to make sense of it all. I was exhausted. I hadn't even realized she was in the room until she finally broke the silence. You really think it's fair? Lisa asked, her tone more serious than usual. You're kicking me out over a few things. You don't understand what I'm going through. I didn't turn to face her. I couldn't. I was too upset, and I needed a moment to collect myself. But her words hit me harder than I expected. Was I being unfair? I took a deep breath before replying. You have no idea what I've been going through. I work all day, and when I come home, I find this place a mess. I'm struggling, Lisa, and you've had everything handed to you. I'm not going to keep cleaning up your mess while you just sit back and relax. Lisa scoffed, stepping forward. Oh, so now you're playing the martyr? Like I don't have my own problems? You don't even understand what I'm dealing with. I'm just trying to get back on my feet. You know what? Maybe I don't even need to be here anymore. Maybe you're right. I'll just go. Her words were like a slap to the face. After everything, she was acting like I was the one who had wronged her. She turned to walk out of the room, but I couldn't let it go that easily. No, Lisa. You don't get to walk away from this like it's nothing. You've been living here rent-free, and now you want to act like I'm the bad guy? No, I'm not letting you off the hook this time. She stopped, her back to me. I could see her shoulders tense, her anger simmering just below the surface. You think this is easy for me? She asked, her voice cracking slightly. I've had to deal with so much crap on my own. And now you're kicking me out, like I'm the one who's done something wrong. I took a few steps closer to her. You've been using me, Lisa. You haven't paid a single cent toward rent. You don't clean up after yourself, and you expect me to just keep letting it slide. I'm done being the one who has to give in. She turned around, her face contorted in disbelief. You're really serious about this, aren't you? Fine, but don't think this is the end. I'll find my own place. But you'll regret this, I swear. The look in her eyes made me pause for a moment. It was like she didn't even see the damage she'd caused. She was so wrapped up in her own issues that she couldn't even fathom how much she had taken from me. I'm not going to regret it, Lisa, I said, my voice steady, though inside I was seething. This is something I should have done a long time ago. She stormed out of the room, and I didn't hear from her for the rest of the evening. I didn't know what to expect next. Would she leave immediately? Or would she drag this out, trying to guilt-trip me into letting her stay longer? The next morning, I woke up to a text from Mom. It was one of those "we need to talk" kind of messages. I had been dreading this. I opened it hesitantly. Lisa told me what happened. I don't think you understand how hard she's been trying. She's been struggling with a lot, and we think you should give her more time. I stared at the message, feeling the weight of her words. I knew exactly where this was going. Mom would beg me to let Lisa stay longer, to be more patient, to keep giving and giving without ever asking for anything in return. But I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to let Lisa manipulate me anymore. I ignored the text and went about my day. It was time for me to focus on myself, to stop being the person who always put everyone else's needs first. For once, I was going to do what was best for me. Around noon, Lisa came into the living room, a suitcase in hand. She looked at me, but there was no apology in her eyes, no acknowledgement of what had just happened. It was like nothing had changed. I'm leaving, she said flatly, but don't think this is over. I'll figure things out. I'm not some charity case, okay? I stood up, walking toward her slowly, trying to keep my emotions in check. You're right. You're not a charity case. But you're also not my responsibility anymore. I hope you learned something from this. She scoffed, rolling her eyes, and without another word, she left. Just like that. As the door slammed behind her, a strange silence fell over the apartment. It was an eerie calm, like everything had finally come to a head and now, there was nothing left to do but wait. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, still processing everything that had just happened. I had told myself it would be a relief, but the truth was, I wasn't sure how to feel. I'd spent so much time being the one who kept things together, trying to keep the peace that now, with Lisa gone, I almost felt lost. For the next few days, there was a lot of radio silence. No text from Lisa, no phone calls from Mom. It was almost like the world had shifted, and I was suddenly in uncharted territory. Was this really the end of it? Would things go back to normal, or would I be forced to pick up the pieces of a broken family? The truth was, I wasn't sure I even wanted things to go back to normal. I had lived my whole life being the one who got overlooked, the one who was expected to be the understanding, patient one. It was exhausting. I'd spent so many years keeping the peace, doing what everyone else wanted, that I had lost sight of what I needed. But as much as I had convinced myself that I was better off without the drama, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still caught up in it. That a few days after Lisa left, I got a call from Mom. I wasn't sure if I was ready to talk to her, but I answered anyway. "Honey, can we please talk?" Mom's voice was shaky, almost pleading. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I could already hear the guilt in her voice. "What do you want to talk about?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "It's about Lisa. She's really struggling, and I think you need to help her. I know things got heated, but she's family, and we need to support each other." I closed my eyes, trying to stay calm. "I've supported her for months, Mom. She's had a free ride, and I'm done with it. You can't keep asking me to take her in when she doesn't even try to pull her weight. I've done enough." "But you're her sister. Family is supposed to stick together," she responded, her voice raising slightly. "You're breaking our family apart." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "No, Mom. She's the one who's been tearing things apart. You've always taken her side. You've always made excuses for her. I'm not doing that anymore." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, like she was trying to find the right words. "I know you're angry, but you have to understand. Lisa needs us right now. She's in a bad place. I can't just turn my back on her." "I'm not turning my back on her. I'm making her face the consequences of her actions," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She needs to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet." Another long pause followed, and when Mom finally spoke, her voice was softer. "I understand you're hurt, honey, but you can't just cut her off like this. It's not healthy." I was quiet for a moment, letting her words settle. Was I being too harsh? Was I being selfish? It was hard to tell, but deep down, I knew I was making the right decision for myself. I wasn't going to let my sister's problems become my burden anymore. "I can't help her if she doesn't want to help herself," I said quietly. "I'm sorry, but I've made my choice." There was no response for a long time. Then, just before I was about to hang up, I heard Mom's voice again, small and defeated. "I hope you know what you're doing." "I do," I said, my heart heavy but resolute. And with that, I ended the call. I didn't feel any better. I didn't feel any worse. It was just done. But then, a couple of days later, I got a text from Lisa. I hadn't heard from her since she'd left, and I figured it was just another demand. Another plea for me to let her back in. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to read it, but curiosity got the better of me. "I know you're mad at me, but I've been thinking, and I realize you're right. I messed up. I shouldn't have taken you for granted. I'm sorry." I stared at the text for a long time. It was unlike anything I'd ever expected from Lisa. She'd never apologized before, and now, here she was, saying she messed up. Part of me wanted to believe it, to think that she had truly changed. But another part of me knew better. It was a one-time thing. A token apology because she had nowhere else to go. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I set my phone down and walked into the living room, needing a moment to process it all. Could I really trust her again? Could I really go back to being the person who gave in every time? Before I could think it through, my phone buzzed again. It was from Mom this time. "Lisa's really struggling. She's not doing well. She says she's trying to find a place, but she's scared. I know you're upset, but please don't give up on her." I stared at Mom's message for a long time. The words blurred together, but the meaning was clear. She was asking me to forgive Lisa, to let her back in, to be the person who always picked up the pieces. The same cycle I had been stuck in for years. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had spent so much time trying to hold everything together, trying to keep peace in a family that had been falling apart for far too long. I had sacrificed so much, and for what? So Lisa could continue to use me, so my parents could keep enabling her? I had finally reached the point where I couldn't give anymore. I put my phone down slowly, my heart heavy but resolute. I had made my decision, and nothing was going to change it. Later that evening, I got another text, this time from Lisa again. I hesitated before reading it. She wasn't going to let it go easily. "I don't have anywhere else to go. Please, I'm really struggling. You're my sister. I need you." The words hung in the air, and I felt that familiar tug of guilt. But it wasn't enough to change my mind. Not this time. I typed a response, my fingers moving with a calm certainty. It wasn't a response I wanted to send, but it was the one that needed to be said. "I'm sorry, Lisa, but I'm done. You need to figure this out on your own. I've helped you more than enough, and I can't keep enabling your mistakes. You need to grow up." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The message felt cold, harsh even, but in the pit of my stomach, I knew it was the right thing to do. It was time for Lisa to face reality. It was time for me to stop being the crutch that propped up everyone else. The silence that followed felt different this time. There was no flood of apologies, no guilt trips, just emptiness. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. My phone buzzed again, and when I looked, it was a message from Mom. "You've really made your decision, haven't you?" "She's family." I sighed, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. What more was there to say? No more explanations, no more pleading. I've made my decision, and I'm not changing my mind. I turned off my phone after that, not bothering to read the rest of the messages that might come in. The decision was made. I had to look out for myself now. As the days passed, I didn't hear from Lisa again. It felt like the final chapter of a long, painful story. Maybe someday she'd understand. Maybe she wouldn't. But I knew one thing for sure. This time, I wasn't going to carry her burden any longer. I had chosen myself, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. No more guilt, no more drama, just me moving forward. And that was enough. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy writing one of these posts, but here I am, sitting in the living room of the house I grew up in, watching a woman I barely know redecorate like she owns the place. Spoiler, she doesn't. My name's Trevor. I'm 27, single, and I work remotely as a systems analyst. Boring job title, I know, but it pays well, and I've always been good with numbers. That talent came in handy when I inherited the house 3 years ago after my mom passed. She left it to me, not my dad. I'll get to that. For now, just know this. I've owned this house, on paper and in every legal sense, since I was 24. My name is on the deed, and the mortgage was paid off years ago. I've been letting my dad stay here rent-free ever since. It's the house he and Mom bought together back in the 90s, and even though it's mine now, it never felt right to kick him out. He's still my dad, even if we haven't exactly been close. Growing up, Dad was kind of there, but not really. You know the type. He went to work, came home, ate dinner in silence, and disappeared into the garage until bedtime. My mom, on the other hand, was everything. My best friend, my rock, my teacher, my defender. When she got sick, I dropped everything to take care of her. She had ovarian cancer. The bad kind. The kind that gives you hope and then rips it away again just when you start to believe she'll pull through. It was 2 years of hospital runs, medication schedules, and late nights sobbing into the kitchen table. I stayed by her side until the very end. Dad didn't. He couldn't handle it. The man checked out emotionally sometime around her second surgery and never really came back. When she passed, I was devastated. But I wasn't surprised when her lawyer told me the house was left to me, not to him. She said she wanted to make sure I always had a place to call home. That stuck with me. The deed was quietly transferred, the will settled, and life went on. I let Dad stay, mostly because I didn't have the heart to uproot him, and also because I was rarely around. My job allows me to travel, and for the past year or so, I'd been doing just that, working from Airbnbs, visiting friends in other states, chasing a kind of freedom I never got to experience in my 20s. But all of that changed 6 months ago. Dad met someone new. Her name is Marlene. She came into his life like a summer thunderstorm, loud, sudden, and leaving a mess behind. I first met her when I came home for Thanksgiving last year. I walked through the door and saw this tall woman in her late 40s rearranging the living room furniture, wearing one of my mom's old scarves like it was some kind of fashion statement. I froze in the doorway, suitcase still in hand, heart racing as I watched her reposition the armchair that had always sat next to the window, Mom's reading chair. "Oh, you must be Trevor," she chirped, walking up to me like we were old friends. "Your father told me all about you." "I'm Marlene." I just nodded, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My dad walked in from the kitchen like this was completely normal, handed me a beer, and acted like everything was fine. I didn't say anything that first night. I sat at the dinner table, listened to them talk about the cruise they were planning, and tried to ignore the fact that my mom's favorite photos had been taken down from the hallway wall. By Christmas, she had moved in. No warning. No heads up. I got back from a work trip in Colorado, unlocked the door, and found her clothes hanging in the front closet. My mom's wedding china had been packed away in the garage, replaced with some cheap pastel dishes that looked like they came from a yard sale. I confronted my dad about it, but he just waved it off. "Marlene's helping me reorganize. It's time for a fresh start." A fresh start. Right. From the very beginning, there was something about her that rubbed me the wrong way. She had this way of inserting herself into conversations she didn't belong in, of making decisions like she'd always been part of the family. I caught her throwing out some of my mom's keepsakes once. Old birthday cards, journals, stuff that didn't mean anything to her, but meant everything to me. When I called her out on it, she gave me this tight-lipped smile and said, "Some things are better left in the past, sweetie." Sweetie, that's when the first real crack formed. I didn't want to start a war, especially not with Dad acting like he was suddenly in love again. I figured if I just stayed out of her way, things would settle. Maybe she'd learn boundaries. Maybe she'd realize I wasn't some kid living in his parents' basement. I was the owner of the house, the guy paying the property taxes, the one keeping the lights on. But Marlene didn't see it that way. To her, I was the guest. It started with little things. She began locking the liquor cabinet, claiming I drank too much after I poured myself a single whiskey one night while watching a football game. She reorganized the kitchen and moved all the pans I used to the garage shelf, telling me I was cluttering the space. She even started commenting on my clothes, suggesting I dress more professionally while working from home. "You never know who might be watching on those Zoom calls," she said with a wink. I laughed it off at first. It wasn't worth the fight, but the tension built slowly, like water rising in a glass. Every passive-aggressive comment, every snide remark, every time she referred to the house as ours, it chipped away at my patience. Then came the chore chart. I walked into the kitchen one morning and found a laminated schedule pinned to the fridge. My name was on it, highlighted in green. I was apparently responsible for guest duties, vacuuming, cleaning the downstairs bathroom, taking out the trash every night. I ripped it down, tossed it in the trash, and tried to forget it. That night, she confronted me like I had committed a federal crime. "Trevor, I put a lot of effort into that chart," she said, arms crossed, voice dripping with fake calm. "We all need to contribute to the household. I don't think it's fair for you to just come and go as you please." I stared at her. "I own this house, Marlene. You're living here because I allow it. Don't forget that." She blinked like I'd slapped her. My dad shuffled in a second later, asking what the commotion was about. I told him, bluntly, that I was tired of being treated like a guest in my own home. Marlene jumped in before he could respond. "He's just being difficult again, Dan. Maybe it's time we talked about setting some boundaries." Boundaries. That word echoed in my head for days. I knew what was coming next, even before it arrived, just not the scale of it. 2 weeks later, after a short work trip to Chicago, I returned home to find an envelope taped to my bedroom door. Inside was a typed letter, complete with bullet points and legal jargon, courtesy of Marlene and Dan. It said that, effective immediately, I would be required to pay $800 a month in rent to continue residing in the family home. It also listed rules. No guests past 9 p.m., no loud music, no cooking after 10 p.m., and all shared spaces were to be kept tidy and presentable at all times. The last line nearly made me laugh out loud. Failure to comply will result in termination of your stay. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding that letter in my hands, heart pounding, part of me wondering if this was some kind of twisted prank. But I knew better. This was Marlene's play. She thought she was asserting control. She didn't know that control had never been hers to begin with. And the best part? She didn't realize the eviction notice she was so quick to threaten had already been signed. But I'll get to that. What happened next made everything before look like child's play. I didn't respond to the rent letter right away. Truth be told, I needed time to think. Not because I was second-guessing myself. Oh no, I knew exactly where I stood, but because I wanted to be absolutely sure that when I did respond, it would leave no room for doubt. I'm not the kind of guy who explodes. I've never been into public shouting matches or dramatic fights. I like to stay calm, measured, strategic, but that doesn't mean I let things slide. I just wait until the moment is right. In the meantime, Marlene wasted no time ramping things up. The day after the letter, she changed the Wi-Fi password. No warning, no note, just silence. I woke up, brewed a cup of coffee, opened my laptop to start the day's work, and boom, no internet connection. I checked the router. Everything was lit up, working fine. Then I noticed a tiny sticky note taped to the side of the modem. For paying tenants only. I laughed out loud. I honestly couldn't believe it. Petty didn't even begin to cover it. She had actually gone out of her way to log into the admin portal and change the Wi-Fi password just to prove some imaginary point. When I asked Dad about it, he shrugged. Marlene handles the utilities now, he said, flipping through a magazine like I wasn't standing right there. She says if you're not contributing, you don't get access. Contributing. That word started popping up more and more. Suddenly, everything I did, or didn't do, was framed through that lens. Didn't empty the dishwasher? I wasn't contributing. Left a jacket on the back of the couch? I wasn't respecting shared space. Even my own bedroom wasn't safe. Marlene came in one afternoon while I was on a call, holding a small trash bin. Just doing the rounds, she said with a saccharine smile. This place gets so cluttered. I stared at her, headset still on, mid-sentence with a client. She didn't even blink. Just walked in, scooped up my wastebasket, and left like it was the most natural thing in the world. After that, I bought a lock for my door. She didn't like that either. Oh, so now we're locking doors, she said the next morning at breakfast, slapping a spoonful of cottage cheese onto a plate like it had personally offended her. Feels a little hostile, don't you think? I didn't answer. I didn't even look up. I just sipped my coffee and waited for the next shoe to drop. It didn't take long. A week later, I came home from the gym to find my bedroom completely rearranged. Bed moved, desk shoved against the wall, even my posters taken down and replaced with a painting of sunflowers that looked like it came from a waiting room. My heart dropped into my stomach. I rushed to the closet. Thankfully, my documents were untouched, but my clothes had been folded and reorganized like I was a guest at a hotel. Marlene thought it needed a woman's touch, Dad said later, when I confronted him. A woman's touch? I snapped. This isn't a dollhouse. This is my room. In my house. But he didn't care. He was completely under her spell. I could see it in the way he looked at her when she walked into a room, like she was the sun and he was some half-frozen satellite, just grateful for the warmth. I wanted to believe he still had a backbone somewhere under all that admiration, but every time I reached for it, he let her speak for him. She's just trying to help, he said. You could show a little appreciation. Appreciation? For what? For invading my space? For treating me like a squatter? It got worse. Marlene started telling the neighbors that she and Dad had taken Trevor in, like I was some poor struggling millennial who had nowhere else to go. I found this out from Mrs. Sandoval next door, who pulled me aside one afternoon while I was mowing the lawn. It's nice that your dad and his new wife are helping you get back on your feet, she said with a gentle smile. I almost dropped the mower. Excuse me. You know, just letting you stay here for a while. Marlene said you were between jobs. Between jobs. I hadn't missed a single paycheck in 5 years. That night, I sat alone in my room, lights off, trying to breathe through the pressure in my chest. I felt like I was losing control of my own life, my own house. Every time I tried to assert myself, Marlene twisted it into an act of aggression. And my dad? He just watched, nodded, shrugged, whatever kept the peace. It wasn't just control she wanted. It was ownership. And then came the mail incident. I ordered a set of legal documents to be sent to the house. Nothing secret, just some updates to my living trust and property records. But when the package didn't show up, I checked the tracking. It had been delivered 2 days earlier. I asked Dad if he'd seen it. Ask Marlene, he said. She handles the mail now. So I did. Oh, that envelope, she said with a smirk. I put it in the recycling. Thought it was junk. My mouth went dry. You opened my mail? It had the house address on it, she said, feigning innocence. And no name. I thought it was just one of those political flyers. It had my full name on it, printed in bold. She knew exactly what she was doing. That night, I retrieved the torn remains from the recycling bin, pieced them together on my desk like a crime scene, and stared at them until I couldn't anymore. Something in me snapped, not with rage, but with clarity. I realized in that moment that Marlene wasn't going to stop. She wasn't just marking territory. She was erasing me. And my dad? He was letting her. I started sleeping with noise-canceling headphones just to block out the sound of their nightly wine and TV sessions downstairs. Every day felt like walking through someone else's home. Her cooking took over the fridge. Her floral scent clung to the furniture. Her laugh, loud and grating, echoed through the halls like some parody of domestic bliss. She even replaced my mom's piano. That one hurt more than I expected. I walked in one weekend to find movers wheeling out the old upright that had sat untouched in the corner since Mom passed. It wasn't in great shape, but it was hers. She used to play lullabies on it when I was a kid. I had planned to restore it someday. Instead, Marlene had traded it in for a sleek new digital keyboard. More modern, she said, sipping tea as the old piano disappeared out the door. It fits the aesthetic better. I didn't say a word. I just turned and left. I drove around for hours that day, aimless, numb. I ended up in the parking lot of an old diner on the edge of town, just staring at the sky. I remember thinking, this can't go on. Something has to change. But it wasn't until the barbecue incident that things truly came to a head. It was a sunny Saturday, early spring, the kind of afternoon that begged for a cold drink and burgers on the grill. I invited a few friends over, just 3 people, all close buddies from college who'd been asking to visit. I didn't even plan to go inside. Just burgers, beers, and a speaker in the backyard. Marlene was not pleased. She came out halfway through, arms crossed, lips pursed, and informed me that we were disrupting the tranquility of the neighborhood. My friends looked at me, confused. I tried to laugh it off. We'll keep it down, don't worry. But she wasn't done. 10 minutes later, she was back, with my dad in tow, and they stood on the porch like a pair of HOA enforcers. This is not appropriate, Trevor, she said. You didn't ask permission. Permission? I echoed. To use my own backyard? Her eyes narrowed. You mean our backyard? That was it. The word hung in the air like a bomb. My friends got quiet. I stared at her, heat rising in my chest. You know what? I said slowly. Why don't we take this inside? I led my friends in, shut the back door, and told them to hang tight in the living room. Then I walked into the study, closed the door, and pulled out a file from the locked drawer of my desk. Inside was everything. The deed, in my name. The will, signed and notarized. The transfer documents. The lawyer's letter. And, tucked neatly in the back, a legally prepared, but as of yet undelivered, eviction notice. I had been holding on to it for months, hoping it wouldn't come to this. But now it wasn't a matter of if. It was a matter of when. And the next move was mine. But before I could act, something happened that flipped everything on its head and gave me the leverage I never knew I needed. Something Marlene never saw coming. There's a moment, right before a major betrayal, when your gut tries to warn you. It's like this sudden, quiet tension in your chest, this odd weight you can't place. I felt that the morning it happened, but I couldn't explain why. The weather was normal. The coffee tasted the same. Dad was already out of the house by 8 a.m., and Marlene was humming in the kitchen like she hadn't spent the previous day accusing me of sabotaging the home's peace. Everything looked normal, but something was off. It started with a phone call from my bank. A routine fraud check, they said. Mr. Clark, the rep said, we just wanted to verify a recent attempt to change the mailing address on your checking and investment accounts. The request came in yesterday afternoon. I froze, phone pressed to my ear, blood draining from my face. I didn't make any request, I said. Okay, thank you. We've already flagged it and reversed the change. But the address submitted matches what we already have on file, just with a slight variation. It was listed as care of Marlene Clark. Is that a relative of yours? I nearly dropped the phone. I hung up, heart pounding in my chest. The rest of the conversation was a blur. I thanked the rep, locked my account with a verification code, and changed every password I could think of. Then I just sat there, staring at the floor, trying to process what I'd just heard. Marlene had tried to access my accounts. She wasn't just being manipulative anymore. She was actively trying to replace me. It wasn't just the Wi-Fi, the furniture, or the piano. It wasn't just the rumors she was spreading to the neighbors or the power trip she'd been riding since she moved in. This was something different. This was deliberate, targeted. She had submitted an address change using my house, with her name listed as the recipient. And that's when it clicked. I ran to the office and yanked open the file drawer again. In addition to the deed and the trust paperwork, I kept a binder of old mail, just in case I ever needed to prove residency or ownership. I flipped through it, hand trembling, and found it, an old mortgage statement addressed to me. Then another, then a tax bill. But sitting right between them was something new, a piece of mail I didn't recognize. It was from a home insurance provider, not mine, and it had Marlene's name on it. Policy application, pending underwriting approval for joint homeowner coverage. I stared at it for a long moment, unable to believe what I was seeing. Joint homeowner. She had applied for co-ownership of my house. And worse, my dad had co-signed. I'm not a crier, but that one hit deep. My throat tightened, and I just sat there in the dim study, blinds half drawn, papers spread across the desk like evidence in a trial. My own father, my blood, had signed his name on a document that tried to hand over a part of the only thing my mom ever left me. Without my consent, without even telling me. A few hours later, he came home like nothing happened. I didn't even give him time to hang up his coat. "What is this?" I said, holding the insurance form in his face. He blinked, confused. "Where did you get that?" "I found it in the mail bin." "You didn't even try to hide it." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "It's just a policy application," he muttered. Marlene wanted to protect her assets. Her what? I snapped. "She doesn't own a single brick of this house. She lives here," he said weakly. "We're building a life together. She moved in 8 months ago, Dad." 8. She threw away Mom's piano. She tried to change my bank records. And now she's applying for ownership. His face tightened. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "No," I said quietly. "I'm finally seeing it clearly." He didn't say another word, just turned and walked out of the room. That night, I locked my door and sat on the floor with a blanket around my shoulders, shaking. Not from fear, something worse. I felt unanchored, like the last thread of family I had was just gone. The next few days were a blur of cold civility. Marlene kept pretending nothing had happened. She chirped good morning, baked muffins, offered me coffee, like we were in a sitcom. Dad avoided me completely. The house was quiet, too quiet, and the silence made everything feel haunted. My mom's absence suddenly felt massive. And then came the party. Marlene's birthday, apparently. I wasn't invited. She planned the whole thing on Facebook, right under my nose, and told the neighbors it was just a little get-together. I only found out when I walked into the kitchen and saw a giant, "Happy Birthday Marlene" banner sitting on the table. She looked up from arranging cupcakes like she'd been caught stealing. "Oh, you're here," she said, adjusting her blouse. "We weren't sure you'd be around this weekend." I stared at her. "You live in my house. Where else would I be?" She didn't answer, just smiled and went back to her frosting. That Saturday, people started arriving around 4 p.m. I recognized most of them. Neighbors, some of Dad's old work friends, a couple of women Marlene played pickleball with. I kept to myself, upstairs, headphones on, trying to drown out the noise. But even through 2 closed doors, I could hear her laughing. Could hear her say our home at least 4 different times. Then I heard my name. "She's trying to help Trevor grow up," someone said. I couldn't place the voice. "Well, I'm just glad she's finally putting her foot down," said another. "He's been living off them for too long." That was enough. I came downstairs, slow, calm, letting every head in the room turn toward me like I was some ghost haunting their wine and cheese buffet. Marlene's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't stop smiling. "There he is," she said. "The man of the hour." I didn't respond. I walked to the dining room, grabbed the mail bin, and fished out 3 envelopes addressed to me. I held them up, turned to her, and said, "You go through my mail again, and I press charges." The room fell silent. She blinked. "Trevor, this isn't the time." "No," I said, voice low and even. "You don't get to say when the time is. You don't get to throw a party in my house. lie to people about who owns it, and pretend I'm the problem. Someone in the back coughed. Marlene's mask cracked just a little. I think you need to calm down. And I think you need to pack a bag, I replied. Her smile faltered. Excuse me. I didn't repeat myself. I turned, walked back upstairs, and locked the door. That night, long after the last car had pulled out of the driveway and the house had gone quiet again, I slid the envelope from my drawer and looked at it one last time. The eviction notice. Signed. Dated. Legal. I'd held onto it for months. Waited for the right moment. Now, the moment had arrived. But just as I was sealing the envelope to deliver it, I heard something that made me pause. Whispers. Outside my bedroom door. I crept closer, pressed my ear to the frame, heart pounding. Marlene, he's unstable. I don't feel safe with him here. Dad, you think we can really get him out? Marlene, if he lays a hand on me or threatens me again, we can file something. I've already looked into it. Emotional distress. Unsafe living conditions. If we play it right, we might be able to get the court to take our side. Once he's out, we can appeal to the city to restructure the deed. Say there was a mistake in the will. Dad, it's risky. Marlene, so is letting him stay. I'm not sharing my life with a spoiled man-child who hides behind paperwork. It's time we take control. My vision blurred. My fingers curled into fists. They were planning to fake a conflict. To get me removed from my own house. To challenge the will. To destroy everything my mom tried to protect. And my own father was part of it. That was the moment. The betrayal wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't a slap or a shout or a slammed door. It was that quiet, chilling moment of hearing the two people under my roof scheme to erase me like I was some temporary inconvenience. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I prepared. Because what they didn't know was that everything, every lie, every letter, every whisper, was about to come crashing down. Rock bottom doesn't always come with a crash. Sometimes it arrives in silence, sits next to you at breakfast, uninvited, and pretends it belongs there. That's what it felt like waking up the next morning. I didn't recognize my own home anymore. Every creak in the hallway felt like an intruder. Every family photo on the wall now had Marlene's smug grin smiling back at me. Even the smell had changed, lavender something. Artificial, powdery, nothing like Mom's old candles. I spent that Sunday in a kind of haze, just watching the sun crawl across the floorboards. I didn't leave my room. I didn't speak to my dad. Marlene tried knocking once in the morning, some fake sweet voice asking if I wanted breakfast. I didn't answer. She didn't try again. I kept replaying those whispered words from the night before. He's unstable. We can file something. Say there was a mistake in the will. It made my skin crawl. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a full-blown ambush. Coordinated. Calculated. And worst of all, coming from the man who used to carry me on his shoulders during parades and cheer the loudest at my high school graduation. I couldn't help wondering if he was always this way. If Mom saw it. If she'd known what would happen the moment she wasn't around to keep him tethered. Maybe that's why she left the house to me instead of him. Maybe she saw this future playing out in her final weeks, silent and sharp-eyed from her hospice bed, knowing full well who he'd become when grief gave him an excuse. But knowing that didn't make it any easier to live through. The next few days blurred together. I tried to keep things normal on the surface, woke up, made coffee, worked in silence. I showered at night when I knew they were asleep. I ate when the kitchen was empty. I moved like a ghost. Every time I left the house, I checked my room twice, locking everything down. I even bought a portable safe for my documents and hid it in the false panel behind my closet drawer. Paranoid? Maybe. But I wasn't taking chances anymore. Then one afternoon, I came home and found my bedroom door slightly open. My heart dropped. I always locked it. Always. I pushed it open slowly, praying that maybe, just maybe, I'd forgotten for once. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew. The air felt off. Violated. The safe was untouched. That much was a relief. But my laptop was gone. I spun around, searching. Desk drawers open. Books scattered. My headset ripped from its stand and tossed on the bed like trash. I didn't scream. Didn't yell. I just stood there, staring at the hollow space where my computer used to be, my thoughts already sprinting through worst-case scenarios. My work was on there. Financial info. Passwords. Contracts. I found Marlene in the kitchen, sipping wine in leggings and a cardigan, flipping through a magazine like it was just another Tuesday. "Where's my laptop?" I asked. She didn't even blink. Oh, that old thing. I moved it. It looked like it was collecting dust. You went into my room, I said flatly. You didn't lock it. Yes, I did. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she smiled. Well, maybe you thought you did. Where is it? She gestured vaguely toward the hallway. I put it on the coffee table. I walked into the living room. Sure enough, there it was, open, on the table, screen black. I touched it, and it was warm. Someone had just been using it. I opened it. The login screen had been attempted 3 times. Wrong password each time. I locked it down immediately, wiped it remotely, and changed every password I could think of. Then I backed it all up to an external drive and buried that drive in the back seat compartment of my car. That night, I called my friend Ethan. He's a real estate lawyer, knows his way around property law better than anyone I've ever met. We hadn't talked in a while. I hadn't wanted to involve anyone in this mess. But now I needed backup. I met him the next day at a coffee shop a few miles away. He listened quietly as I laid it all out. The letter, the insurance policy, the mail tampering, the account access attempt, the whispers outside my door. I showed him photos, emails, even the time-stamped video footage from my phone of Marlene rummaging through my drawers once when I'd left it recording on accident. He whistled low. You've got enough to press charges if you want. I nodded. I don't want it to go there. Not yet. He leaned back. So what do you want? I paused, sipped my coffee. I want them out. Quietly. Permanently. No drama. No court fight. Just gone. He smiled. Then let's make that happen. That meeting became the beginning of my plan. Ethan walked me through the legalities of eviction for non-paying tenants, even if they were family. He explained the necessary notices, the timelines, the paperwork. I already had the signed eviction notice, but I hadn't served it yet. He suggested I do it by the book. Hire a process server. Document everything. Be polite, professional, cold. Treat it like a business transaction, he said. You're not evicting your dad. You're removing 2 unlawful occupants from a property you legally own. Period. I nodded, but my chest still felt heavy. The emotional part, the part where I had to come to terms with the fact that my father wasn't the man I thought he was, that was going to take longer to process. When I got home that evening, Marlene was waiting in the living room. I noticed you've been a little distant, she said, fake concern painted all over her face. I didn't answer. She stood and crossed her arms. Look, Trevor, I get it. You're feeling displaced. But this house isn't just yours anymore. We're a family now. Your father and I are building something. My fists clenched at my sides. You had no right to touch my mail. Or my laptop. Her eyes flickered. You're being dramatic. No, I'm being patient, which is more than you deserve. She stepped forward. If you're not happy here, maybe you should find somewhere else to stay. There it was. The invitation to walk away from my own home. I stared at her, long and hard. Then I said, you know what? Maybe I will. I left that night. Packed a bag, laptop, documents, clothes. I didn't tell them where I was going. For the next week, I stayed at a friend's place. Slept on his couch. Worked during the day. Planned at night. Ethan helped me draft the official eviction notice. We scheduled the service date. We contacted a locksmith. We prepped everything. Legally, emotionally, tactically. And the whole time, I watched from afar as Marlene and my dad settled deeper into the illusion that they'd won. They changed the Wi-Fi again. Posted new photos online. Our home, fresh start, family dinners. They didn't even ask where I'd gone. Didn't text. Didn't call. It was like I'd already been erased. But what they didn't know was that every day I was gone, I was getting stronger. More prepared. More certain. Rock bottom had burned everything that tied me to the hope that things might get better on their own. Now, I was ready to take everything back. I don't think I truly understood the phrase the comeback is always stronger than the setback until that month away. The day I walked out of my own house with a duffel bag over my shoulder and the sound of Marlene's smug humming in the background, I felt like I was losing. It didn't matter that I had the legal documents or the moral high ground or even that the house was in my name. Emotionally, I felt defeated, discarded, like I'd been outplayed in my own home. But time and distance can do something powerful when you're focused. They help you rebuild, not just plans, but purpose. I crashed at my friend Noah's place. He's the kind of guy who doesn't ask too many questions. He just handed me a spare key, cleared off a shelf in the fridge, and said, "Stay as long as you need." That first night, I barely spoke. I just lay on his old futon staring at the ceiling, thinking about every red flag I'd ignored for the past year. The next morning, I made a decision. No more waiting. No more giving them space to scheme. It was time to start the process, slow, steady, and precise. The first thing I did was meet Ethan again. This time, I was all business. He helped me file the official eviction notice with the local court. Since Marlene and my father weren't paying rent and had no lease, they were considered licensees under the law, which meant they had no tenancy rights. We filed the notice to vacate with a 30-day window, more than generous, and scheduled a certified process server to deliver it personally. No chance of it being lost in the mail or accidentally shredded. Once that was in motion, I turned my attention inward, living away from home, away from the tension, the manipulation, the quiet warfare, was like suddenly exhaling after months of holding my breath. Noah's apartment was modest but clean, peaceful. No slammed doors. No passive-aggressive notes. No one rifling through my things. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could hear myself think. I worked harder than ever during those weeks. Without the stress of Marlene's constant nitpicking or my dad's ghost-like absence, I found a groove I hadn't felt since college. I woke up early, hit the gym, knocked out projects ahead of schedule, and even picked up 2 new freelance clients. The extra income meant I could start setting things up for after the eviction, contingency plans, upgrades to the house, maybe even renovations Mom had always dreamed of doing. But it wasn't just financial momentum I was gaining. My confidence started coming back. Every time I opened a message from my lawyer confirming another legal step taken, or reviewed footage from the security camera I discreetly set up outside the front door before leaving, I felt less like a victim and more like the version of myself my mom raised me to be. Thoughtful, methodical, and unwilling to be bullied. Speaking of the camera, Marlene didn't notice it. It was hidden inside the decorative birdhouse on the front porch. Battery-operated, Wi-Fi enabled, motion-triggered, backed up to the cloud. I'd installed it on a whim months ago, mostly to monitor package theft. But now it was my best tool. I got clips sent to my email every time someone came or left. At first, it was boring stuff. Marlene waving to the neighbors, my dad unloading groceries, a few unfamiliar faces stopping by. But then one video changed everything. It was just after 8 p.m. on a Wednesday. Marlene stood on the porch with some guy I didn't recognize, mid-50s, tan, expensive-looking watch, khakis that screamed financial advisor. The video had no sound, but body language said it all. She handed him a stack of papers. He flipped through them, pointed at something. She nodded. Then they shook hands. I called Ethan immediately. I think she's trying to sell something, I said. He asked me to send the clip. An hour later, he called back. Trevor, you were right to be suspicious. The man she met with works for a private real estate brokerage. If she's trying to transfer property, we need to act fast. She may be misrepresenting her ownership status. I felt my throat go dry. She wouldn't dare. He sighed. She's bold, but not smart. We'll make sure this gets documented. If she's forging anything, she's committing fraud. That will help your case even more. We added the footage to our file. That's when I realized I had the upper hand now, and I needed to act like it. I started preparing the house. Noah's cousin, Chelsea, worked in interior design. I paid her to draw up renovation concepts for the kitchen and living room. She created beautiful mock-ups, light oak flooring, open shelving, new lighting, earth tones with subtle modern touches. She even had a friend in landscaping who offered to draft a new backyard plan, complete with a fire pit and pergola. I didn't just want them out. I wanted to breathe life back into that house, to make it mine again. But I didn't stop there. I also met with a local realtor, not to sell, but to evaluate. I wanted a full appraisal. When she toured the place, from old photos and my descriptions, she said the house could easily be worth 30% more with the updates I was planning. That number stuck with me. Not just the value of the house, but the value of taking it back. The best part? All of it. Every quote, every plan, every improvement was under my name. No co-signers. No household contributions. No one else's fingerprints on the vision. Meanwhile, back at the house, the tension was boiling. According to the server I hired, Marlene answered the door when he delivered the eviction notice. She refused to take it at first, but once she realized it was official, she apparently tried to argue with him. Good luck throwing out your own father, she reportedly snapped before slamming the door. The server, unfazed, logged the interaction and handed me the receipt. "They've got 30 days, he said. "After that, we file for a court order. Then you can bring a sheriff." But I didn't want it to get that far. If I could make them leave without dragging this through the courts, I would. The next week, I returned to the house for the first time since leaving. They weren't home. I stepped through the front door and just stood there for a minute. The smell was different, stronger, like overly sweet candles mixed with lemon disinfectant. The furniture had shifted again. My mom's old coffee table had been pushed against the wall, replaced with a modern glass one that didn't fit the vibe at all. The walls had more framed pictures of Marlene and Dad. Even the cat, my childhood cat, Bailey, looked confused when he saw me. He meowed like he hadn't seen me in years. I knelt down and pet him. "I'm getting you out of here, buddy," I whispered. I went straight to my room. Still intact, still locked. But I noticed something new. The carpet outside had been replaced. Not professionally, just a cheap runner rug, tacked down sloppily, like they were trying to cover something. I peeled it up. There, in faint permanent marker, were the words, "Trevor's room, no entry." My mom had written it when I was a kid. I remember helping her stencil it after we painted the hallway. Seeing it now, faded, half erased, covered up, was like someone had drawn a line through my entire childhood. I didn't cry, but I sat there for a long time. Before I left, I slipped a typed letter into the kitchen drawer, the one Marlene used for her mail. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't emotional. Just a clear reminder. As per the legal eviction notice served on date, you have X days remaining to vacate the property located at address, currently and lawfully owned by Trevor Clark. Failure to do so will result in a court-ordered removal. No further communication is necessary unless regarding the logistics of departure. This is not a negotiation. T. Clark. It was short, firm, professional. It felt good to write. Over the next 2 weeks, things changed rapidly. I heard through the grapevine, thanks to Mrs. Sandoval again, that Marlene had started telling people I'd bequeathed the house to her and Dad. She made it sound like I'd left town for good. She even told the postman to redirect my mail to her name. I corrected that in less than a day, filed a complaint with the post office, updated my forwarding address, and when she tried to post online that she was hosting another garden brunch at her house, I sent a takedown notice to the event site with my property deed attached. The listing was removed within 48 hours. One by one, I stripped her control away. Quietly, legally, permanently. I wasn't screaming or making threats. I was just undoing every string she'd tried to pull, every lie she'd spun, every inch she'd stolen. And then something unexpected happened. My father called me. It was 8:13 p.m. on a Thursday. I almost didn't pick up, but something in me said I should. "Trevor," he said, "we need to talk." I waited. "I didn't think it would get this far," he continued. "She said you were just bluffing." I didn't answer. There was a long pause. I didn't sign anything, you know. Nothing legal. The insurance thing, she filled that out. I didn't co-sign. I didn't know she was doing it behind your back. Now that surprised me. "She forged your signature?" He hesitated. "She asked me to sign something once. I didn't. I didn't want to get in the middle. But you were in the middle." "I know," he said quietly. "I should have said something. I should have stopped it earlier." Another pause. She's talking about leaving." My heartbeat slowed. "She said she's not staying where she isn't wanted." I stayed silent. "I don't know what I'm going to do." That last part, "I don't know what I'm going to do," wasn't meant as an update. It was a plea, but I had no comfort left to give. I simply said, "You've got 15 days. Then I hung up. The next day, I sent Ethan one final update. They're almost out. Because even if they didn't know it yet, their time was up. 2 days after that phone call, I got a text from Mrs. Sandoval. "Trevor, I thought you should know. There's a U-Haul in your driveway." I stared at it for a long moment, unsure what to feel. Relief? Triumph? The adrenaline-charged kind of excitement you get when you finally win an argument that's been festering for months? But the weirdest part was how numb I felt. Like I had been preparing for this so long that the actual moment of movement, the shift, barely registered. They were finally packing up. I didn't rush over. I waited. Let them sweat. Let them wonder if I'd show. I had no intention of confronting them unless necessary. At this point, I had all the leverage I needed and none of the emotional bandwidth left to waste. But while the visible battle was winding down, the hidden part, the part one hadn't even seen until recently, was just beginning to unravel. It started when Ethan called again. You're going to want to sit down for this, he said. Should I be worried? No, but you'll be mad. He explained that after reviewing Marlene's insurance documents in more detail, specifically the joint homeowner policy she'd tried to apply for, he'd flagged something odd in the application. A box had been checked indicating joint financial interest in property, and listed my father's signature below. I thought he said he didn't sign anything. That's the problem, Ethan said. The signature doesn't match his actual handwriting. Not even close. He sent me a scanned copy. I opened it, leaned in, and immediately saw it. The D in Dan was written in a looped cursive that my dad never used. The rest was sloppy, almost like someone had forged it quickly, or carelessly. Marlene forged it, I said, breath catching. That's what it looks like. Which is fraud, if we want to pursue it. And we can prove it. We already can. I just needed your green light to move forward. I didn't say anything for a second. Then I nodded to myself. Do it. Let's build the case. Because now, it wasn't just about eviction. It was about exposing her, legally, publicly, thoroughly. It was about the bigger picture. I had something she didn't expect. Patience. And receipts. I spent the next few days collecting everything. Every email, text, photograph, screenshot, voicemail, and video clip. I archived the footage of her giving those insurance documents to the man on the porch. I downloaded the audio from the camera that had picked up their whispered conversation about filing something against me. I backed up every photo of the house that showed her claiming ownership online, every family brunch post where she used the phrase, our house, and every false statement she'd made to the neighbors that Mrs. Sandoval had kindly documented. And then I found something else. Buried in my old Gmail inbox was a shared Google Doc from 3 months ago, something she'd created and invited me to view, which I'd ignored at the time. The file was titled Household Budget Plus Contributions. It wasn't a budget. It was a narrative, a list of things she claimed to have provided to the house since moving in. Paint, cleaning supplies, new decor, utility payments, except most of them were either exaggerated or completely made up. At the bottom of the document, she had included a note. If legal proceedings ever occur, this will help prove I've contributed financially to the household. I stared at that line, stunned. She had been preparing for this all along, positioning herself, creating a paper trail, even a fake one, just in case she ever needed to fight for the house. It was bold, almost impressive, but it also gave me exactly what I needed. I forwarded it to Ethan. This shows intent, he said. She's been planning to assert false rights to the property from the beginning. With everything else you've gathered, this strengthens the fraud case. If she tries anything else, if she damages the home on her way out, if she refuses to return the keys, if she so much as changes the Wi-Fi password again, we can take her to court and win. Easily. Would she get jail time? I asked quietly. Unlikely. But civil penalties, fines, possible restitution? Absolutely. She's looking at a financial hit, Trevor. Good. Because money was the one thing Marlene seemed to care about more than control. It was always the undercurrent to everything she did. Her designer bags, her thinly veiled comments about financial responsibility, the way she bragged about managing the household budget, even though she wasn't paying a dime of rent. She'd made herself queen of a castle she didn't own, and now that her throne was crumbling, I could almost hear her scrambling to cling to every last scrap of illusion. Which is why I did the one thing she never expected. I went quiet. No confrontation. No final showdown. No dramatic speech on the porch as they loaded the last of their boxes. I didn't even check in with Mrs. Sandoval for updates. I just focused on myself, on work, on meetings with contractors, on checking things off my to-do list like I was already living in a post-Marlene world. And then, out of nowhere, I got a call. Blocked number. I debated letting it ring, but curiosity won. Trevor Clark? A voice asked. Female. Sharp. Professional. Who's asking? This is Danielle Myers. I'm a private investigator hired to verify claims related to a civil asset dispute. I believe you know a Marlene Dawson. I nearly dropped the phone. She hired you. I'm afraid I can't disclose my client. But I'm calling to verify whether you're the sole owner of the property at address. I exhaled slowly. I am. And is your name the only one listed on the deed? It is. There was a pause on the other end. She was typing something. And are you currently pursuing any legal action against Miss Dawson? That depends. Are you recording this? Another pause. No. But I can be, if necessary. Then yes, I said. I am. She thanked me and hung up. I stared at the wall for a full minute, pulse pounding. So she was still fighting. Even as the U-Haul pulled away. Even as the final days ticked down. Even as my lawyer gathered proof that could crater her financially, she was hiring investigators to look for angles, loopholes, leverage. And in that moment, I knew. She wasn't just trying to take the house. She was trying to take me down with her. Which is when I stopped playing defense. I met with Ethan again. This time, we didn't talk about the eviction. That was already in motion. We talked about what came after. What if she sues? I asked. She won't win. But if she does it just to drain time, energy, money? He nodded slowly. Then you countersue. And that's when the idea hit me. Not just to end this, but to end it publicly. I told Ethan my plan. He raised an eyebrow, impressed. It's bold, he said. But it's clean. And completely legal. I want the whole truth on the record, I said. Every detail. Every lie. Every forged signature. I want her name attached to all of it. He smiled. Then let's go on offense. Because the truth is, I wasn't just evicting them anymore. I was preparing to make sure they could never do this to anyone else. I wasn't seeking revenge out of bitterness anymore. I was doing it to reclaim every inch of ground they tried to take from me. And the best part? They didn't even know the storm was coming. The day they moved out was gray, damp, and quiet. No sunshine. No birds. Just the dull rumble of a half-full U-Haul pulling out of the driveway I had memorized since childhood. I watched the live stream from my security camera on Noah's tablet. Marlene was barking orders at my dad while dragging a suitcase that looked heavier than it had any right to be. My father's face was unreadable, just blank, drawn, hollow. They didn't slam the door when they left. They didn't wave. They didn't say goodbye. That would have required the kind of dignity they never had. I waited until the next morning to return. There's something almost sacred about walking into your own home after it's been desecrated. The air felt still, suspended in awkward silence, like the walls were holding their breath. The hallway smelled like cheap perfume and leftover lemon disinfectant. The fridge was empty. Half the shelves were stripped. The living room had dents in the walls from where furniture had been dragged too quickly. But what stung the most? They'd taken Bailey. My cat. My mom's cat. The cat that used to sleep on her pillow for months after she passed, waiting for her to come home. He was gone. I stood in the hallway for 10 minutes with my hands in my pockets, jaw clenched, staring at the spot where his food bowl used to sit. And something in me turned cold. Not angry, not sad, just focused. They'd crossed a line I hadn't even drawn. So I called Ethan. He answered on the first ring. They out? Yes. But they took the cat. He paused. Seriously? Seriously. That's theft. I know. And we're already pressing charges for the forged signature and financial misrepresentation. This just adds more fuel. I didn't respond. I'll make the call, he said. Let's hit them with everything. And that's exactly what we did. Within 3 days, Ethan filed a multi-claim civil suit naming both Marlene and my father as co-defendants. The charges included fraudulent misrepresentation, attempted property theft, forgery of legal documents, the fake insurance co-signature, intentional interference with financial assets, her attempted bank address change, mail tampering, documented with time-stamped video and USPS complaint records, pet theft, yes, that's a thing, and Bailey was registered under my name at the vet. Ethan packaged the entire thing like a perfectly wrapped gift for the court. Clean, airtight, devastating. He even attached screenshots of Marlene's online posts where she referred to the house as ours and tried to organize brunches on a property she didn't own. But we didn't stop there. 2 weeks later, a certified letter was delivered to Marlene's new address, a modest condo she was renting on the other side of town. The letter was from the local newspaper's legal column editor. They'd received an anonymous tip, courtesy of Ethan's media contacts, regarding a pending fraud suit involving a woman who had attempted to steal ownership of a family home through forged paperwork and financial manipulation. The editor had no intention of printing names before the court hearing, but the letter served as a courtesy notice that they were monitoring the case for a potential feature on rising estate fraud trends. In short, we let her know that her reputation was now tied to her lies. She called me that night. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail. Her voice, so often smug and condescending, was trembling. Trevor, we don't have to do this. Okay. We can work something out. This is getting out of hand. Your father didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean. Look, we were just trying to find our place. I listened to it twice. Then I forwarded it to Ethan. Sounds like an admission of guilt to me, he said. We added it to the file. The next few weeks were a flurry of legal back and forth. Marlene hired a lawyer, some smooth-talking guy from a downtown firm who probably specialized in family disputes and HOA nonsense. They tried to settle, offered to return any items mistakenly taken, and issue a formal apology in exchange for dropping the suit. Ethan rejected it without blinking. We're not settling, he told them. Your client tried to steal a six-figure asset, alter financial records, and tampered with federal mail. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's a pattern, and we're going to make sure that pattern is fully documented in public record. Marlene's lawyer went quiet after that. That's when I made my final move. See, there's something else about owning a house people forget. You have control of the narrative. And in this digital age, that narrative extends everywhere. With Ethan's help, I filed a cease and desist against Marlene for misrepresenting ownership of the property in any public or digital forum. We sent copies to every neighborhood Facebook group she had ever posted in, every HOA mailing list she subscribed to, and even a few event websites she had used to organize her fake garden parties. We didn't smear her. We simply attached the legal documentation confirming my sole ownership of the house, explained that she had no rights to the property, and included a note that any continued misrepresentation would be met with legal escalation. It wasn't vindictive. It was precise. Neighbors started talking. Mrs. Sandoval texted me. I had no idea she was lying all that time. She told everyone you'd moved to Michigan. Even my dad's old golf buddy, Rick, called me out of the blue. Trevor, listen. I'm sorry I didn't ask sooner. Marlene said you'd given the house to your dad. We all just assumed. I mean, she made it sound so real. I know, I said. That's why I'm fixing it. But revenge isn't always about public exposure. Sometimes, the most satisfying part is the quiet reversal, the reclaiming of things they tried to take. So I went to the vet. I explained the situation. Provided documentation proving Bailey was mine, registered in my name, microchipped, vaccinated under my billing history for years. The vet staff was horrified. They confirmed that Marlene had brought Bailey in under the pretense that she was rescuing a cat from a neglectful home. They even said she tried to change the microchip information. Illegally. The vet filed an incident report. Animal control got involved. Within a week, an officer showed up at Marlene's door with a warrant to seize Bailey and return him to his lawful owner. He was back in my arms by sunset. Skinny. A little skittish. But still him. He curled up on my chest that night and purred like nothing had changed. That was the moment I felt it. Not victory, but closure. Every lie they spun had unraveled. Every manipulative power play had backfired. And every piece of what made that house mine, down to the cat sleeping on the windowsill, was finally home again. A month later, we had our court date. Marlene didn't show. She sent her lawyer. My father showed up. Alone. He looked older than I remembered. Tired. Smaller. We didn't speak. Just sat on opposite ends of the courtroom, flanked by silence and lawyers. Ethan laid out everything. The forged signature, the insurance scam, the tampered mail, the attempted bank fraud, the fabricated cohabitation claims, the theft of my pet. He did it calmly, with documents, screenshots, timestamps. No drama, no rage, just truth. At the end of the session, the judge didn't even hesitate. Verdict in my favor. Formal reprimand to Marlene. Court-ordered financial restitution. A permanent legal record of her fraud. Everything she'd tried to manipulate, twist, or fake was now cemented in black and white record. Indisputable, irreversible, humiliating. As for my dad, he approached me in the hallway afterward. Hands in his pockets. Eyes down. I didn't know she was doing all that, he mumbled. I thought I was starting over. You were, I said. But not with me. He nodded. Then he walked away. No apology. No grand moment. Just distance. Which, at that point, was all I needed. Back at the house, I lit the old fireplace for the first time in years. Bailey lay on the rug, purring. I sat in Mom's armchair, fresh coat of paint on the walls, her favorite book resting on the side table, and I realized something. Revenge doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be final. And this was over. Fallout, when done right, isn't explosive. It's quiet. Slow. Inescapable. like smoke curling under a locked door, seeping into everything you thought was safe. That's how it was for Marlene and my father. No big, dramatic collapse. Just a gradual unraveling of the little empire they built on lies, manipulation, and fake charm. After the court ruling, Marlene went silent. She didn't appeal the decision, didn't return any of the formal demands for restitution payments, didn't even attempt to communicate through her lawyer. The court gave her 30 days to begin paying damages, or a lien would be placed against her assets. Though from what Ethan could gather, she didn't own much outright. Her car was leased. Her bank account was modest. The only reason she'd managed to keep up appearances for so long was because she was living on illusion and other people's generosity. That illusion cracked fast. The story of her eviction spread slowly through the neighborhood. I never told anyone directly. I didn't need to. One by one, the truth leaked out through quiet conversations and watchful neighbors. Mrs. Sandoval mentioned it to her book club. Rick brought it up during a golf game. Even the HOA president emailed me personally to apologize for misunderstanding the nature of her occupancy and for any assumptions they had made. She was, in her words, deeply sorry for letting community gossip override the facts. It was all more validation than I needed. But it didn't stop there. Marlene lost her social standing almost overnight. No more brunch invites. No more garden parties. Her name disappeared from the neighborhood events page. She was quietly removed from 2 local community Facebook groups, banned for spreading misinformation and creating unnecessary conflict. She tried to claw back some sympathy, of course. One post surfaced under a burner account, clearly hers, where she claimed she had been tricked by her ungrateful stepson, that she was promised a place in the family home and had been emotionally abused and targeted by legal manipulation. But screenshots are forever. And unfortunately for her, I'd already posted a carefully worded public statement, just once, on my personal page, laying out the facts. I was the sole owner of the home. My mother's will had named me her successor and beneficiary. Marlene had never paid rent, signed a lease, or held any legal claim to the property. Any allegations she made were attempts to reverse engineer ownership of something she was never entitled to. I didn't name call. I didn't attack. I let the truth speak. And people listened. That post got shared dozens of times across local forums, including one on estate fraud awareness, where people began comparing notes and experiences with their own Marlene types. Apparently, she wasn't unique. Her name became a cautionary tale. As for my dad, he didn't bounce back the way she did. He tried, for a while, to distance himself from the whole thing. Tried telling people he wasn't involved, that he just wanted peace, and that I had overreacted. But records don't lie. The court didn't lie. The absence of any kind of apology, public or private, spoke volumes. We didn't speak for months. He sent one email after the hearing. It was 3 sentences long. I'm sorry for what happened. I didn't know how to stop it. I hope someday we can talk again. I didn't respond. Because that wasn't an apology, it was a deflection. An oops from a man who watched it all happen and did nothing. A man who sat beside a woman as she tried to take away everything his late wife had left behind. Who watched me struggle, get pushed out of my own house, have my mail stolen, my bank accounts tampered with, my childhood pet taken, and still kept quiet. He made his choice, and I made mine. I moved forward. The house, once a battleground, slowly became mine again in every way. The floral candles were tossed. The lemon-scented nonsense went in the trash. I hired a team of contractors and started the renovations my mom had always dreamed about but never got around to. We knocked down the kitchen wall and opened the space into a beautiful dining area with natural light. I restored the hardwood floors, added new windows, and turned the garage into a home office with skylights. Chelsea, the interior designer who helped me months ago, became a regular presence. She had an eye for color, for warmth, and she respected the sentimental value of every piece of furniture I kept. Together, we rebuilt the heart of the home. Not to forget what had happened, but to reclaim it. To overwrite the bad memories with better ones. Bailey took some time to adjust. For the first few weeks, he'd jump at every sound, hide in closets, sleep under the bed instead of on it. But slowly, his confidence returned. He started greeting me at the door again, climbing onto my desk during Zoom meetings, pawing at the sunbeams in the kitchen, just like he used to when Mom was still alive. Life, in its own time, healed. And then came the letter. 6 months after the lawsuit ended. A plain envelope. No return address. Inside, a single piece of paper. No signature. No greeting. Just typed words. I didn't take your cat to hurt you. I took him because I thought I deserved something to love, too. You were always going to win. But I hope you know, I never hated you. I just wanted a place where I mattered. I stared at it for a long time. Marlene. Even now, still trying to write her own version of the story. Still pretending she was just misunderstood. Still not taking responsibility. I burned the letter in the fireplace that night. Not out of spite. Out of finality. Because I didn't need to hold on to anything else she touched. Not her words. Not her memory. Not even her guilt. Everything she tried to take, my house, my peace, my identity, was mine again. The revenge wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was in every quiet morning I woke up to a house that felt like home again. In every time Bailey purred on my chest. In every friend who dropped by and said, "Man, this place looks amazing." In every contractor who complimented the layout. In every night I sat at my mom's piano. Yes, I tracked it down at the resale store and bought it back, and let the chords echo through the same walls she once filled with music. They tried to take everything, and now they had nothing, and I had more than they ever understood. Not just a house, but freedom, closure, and peace that couldn't be stolen, sold, or forged. Final line. I didn't just get my home back. I got me back. And this time, no one's taking either. My name's Adrian, I'm 29, and if you had asked me a few years ago, I would have told you I wasn't the type of person who needed a big wedding. I always imagined something small, personal, just me, my future wife, and the people who truly cared about us. But as life often does, it took that simple dream and threw it into the middle of a storm I didn't see coming. It started months before the wedding when invitations went out. My fiancée, Emma, and I were so excited. We spent hours choosing the perfect little cards, writing each name carefully, thinking about how much each person meant to us. We didn't have a massive budget, but what we lacked in extravagance we made up for in thoughtfulness. For family, I figured it was a given they'd be there. My parents lived just an hour away. My sister, Melissa, was only 30 minutes from them. They were my closest relatives, and even though we weren't the most emotionally open family, I still assumed they'd show up for me on one of the biggest days of my life. But if there's one thing about my family, it's that they somehow find a way to make everything feel like a competition, or worse, like my life events are inconveniences to theirs. Ever since I moved out at 20, there's been this undercurrent of passive-aggressive commentary from my mom about how I left them behind, or how I was too busy with my own life to come around as often as they wanted. Melissa, on the other hand, has always been, well, the golden child. She's 5 years older than me, and my mom seems to believe she can do no wrong. Melissa could miss birthdays, forget anniversaries, or make cutting remarks at family gatherings, and somehow it was always brushed off. If I so much as forgot to text Happy Mother's Day before noon, I'd get an earful. Still, I didn't expect anything dramatic about the wedding. I thought maybe they'd grumble about the drive or the fact that it wasn't a lavish event like Melissa's wedding years ago, but they'd be there. I was wrong. 2 weeks before the big day, I sent a quick reminder to the family group chat. Hey, just a heads up, Emma and I are getting married next Friday. Would love to see you there. I figured it was more polite than assuming they'd remember, especially since Melissa hadn't mentioned anything about the RSVP card we sent. Her reply came less than 2 minutes later. We're busy. Don't expect us. No explanation. No sorry. No we'll try. Just flat. Before I could even type a response, my mom chimed in. It's not always about you, Adrian. You can't expect everyone to drop their lives because you're having a wedding. I stared at my phone, trying to process that. I could feel Emma's eyes on me from across the couch, her hand pausing midair as she scrolled through her laptop. What's wrong? She asked, her voice careful. They're not coming, I said slowly, as if saying it any faster would make it feel too real. Emma blinked, like she wasn't sure she'd heard me right. Your mom and sister? To your wedding. I held up my phone so she could see the thread. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't say anything right away. That's one of the things I love about her. She knows when I need silence more than words. But the silence in that moment felt like a weight. I typed back just 2 words. Got it. No begging. No guilt tripping. If they didn't care enough to be there, I wasn't going to twist myself into knots to convince them. Over the next few days, I told myself I'd let it go. I still had Emma's family, who had welcomed me with open arms since day one. I had friends traveling from out of state just to be there. I didn't need my mom or Melissa to make the day special. But the thing is, when it's your own family, you can't just flip a switch and stop caring. It started eating at me in quiet moments. When I was at work, when Emma and I were finalizing seating charts, when I'd catch myself daydreaming about walking down the aisle and realizing there'd be two glaring empty seats in the front row. I kept picturing Melissa's smug face, imagining her saying something like, "Well, you didn't come to my barbecue last summer, so why should I come to your wedding?" Then, 5 days before the wedding, I found out what busy meant. A cousin of mine posted a picture on Facebook. Melissa, my mom, and a few other relatives at a fancy winery, all smiling like they were posing for a lifestyle magazine spread. The caption read, "Family Getaway Weekend. Couldn't be happier." The kicker? The date on the post was for the same weekend as my wedding. They'd planned it weeks in advance. That wasn't just them not coming. That was them deliberately choosing something else, something they knew would clash. It wasn't about being busy. It was about making a point. I didn't comment. I didn't message. I just stared at that photo for a long time, feeling this mix of anger and something that almost felt like grief. Because in that moment, it hit me that my family wasn't just absent, they were actively avoiding me. And deep down, I wanted them to feel even a fraction of the sting they'd just given me. And that's when the idea started forming, quietly, at first. Just a thought, a whisper in the back of my mind. But the more I sat with it, the louder it got. The night before the wedding, that whisper became a plan. I knew exactly what they'd see on Facebook, and I knew exactly how it would make them drop everything. That was the moment everything shifted, and they had no idea what was coming. The morning after I saw that winery post, I woke up with this heavy, gnawing pit in my stomach. It wasn't just about them not coming anymore. It was about the pattern. Every time something important happened in my life, they found a way to downplay it or turn it into a competition. And the more I thought about it, the more memories came flooding back, each one like a little paper cut I'd ignored until I realized I was bleeding. I remembered my college graduation. It was the first time I'd ever seen my dad cry. Except he wasn't crying for me. He was tearing up because Melissa had managed to drive 2 hours in heels and still look camera ready for the ceremony. My mom gushed about her the entire day, barely mentioning my name unless someone else brought it up. I'd brushed it off back then, telling myself it was just how they were. But now I could see it for what it was. Favoritism, plain and simple. Even the way they talked about Emma had been off. From the moment we got engaged, my mom had this subtle way of undermining her. She'd say things like, "Well, I hope she knows how to handle you, Adrian," in front of everyone, followed by that fake little laugh she used to make things sound like jokes. Melissa would chime in with backhanded compliments. "She's pretty in her own way," or "You must really love her if you're willing to settle down so young," as if Emma wasn't standing right there. Emma always took the high road, smiling politely, but I knew those comments stuck with her. She once told me, in a quiet moment after dinner with my family, "I feel like no matter what I do, I'll never be enough for them." That sentence replayed in my head as I stared at that winery picture. They weren't just skipping our wedding. They were sending a message, "You're not worth showing up for." 3 days before the wedding, my cousin Sarah called me. She's one of the few relatives who's been consistently kind to me, so I picked up, expecting her to check in. Instead, she sounded awkward. "Hey, I just thought you should know, Melissa's been telling people that your wedding's going to be small. Like, really small. She said it's more of a casual get-together than an actual wedding." I blinked, stunned. Why would she even say that? Sarah hesitated. "She told Aunt Linda that you're probably cutting corners because you can't afford anything bigger." She also implied that Emma's family is covering most of it. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. That was a lie, and she knew it. Emma and I had worked our tails off to pay for every detail ourselves. It wasn't a lavish event, but it was ours, and we were proud of it. Hearing Melissa dismiss it like that felt like someone spitting in my face. When I told Emma, she gave me this look, half hurt, half tired. It's like they can't stand to let you have a moment without trying to cheapen it. It wasn't just words, either. The next day, I found out from another cousin that Melissa had been joking about throwing her own party that weekend and inviting all the same people, just to see who would pick which event. I didn't even know if that part was true or if she was just saying it to stir things up, but the fact that it was believable said enough. By now, the anger had hardened into something else, a quiet determination. I wasn't going to plead with them, and I wasn't going to argue. But I also wasn't going to let them write the story of my wedding as some small, forgettable thing that no one cared about. I started making some calls. Not to them, but to people I knew they kept tabs on, relatives they always wanted to impress, acquaintances they liked to boast about knowing. I didn't tell anyone my full plan, just that there'd be something worth seeing after the ceremony. My voice was calm, almost casual, but inside I was piecing everything together. And then, the final straw came. The day before the wedding, my mom sent me a text out of the blue. If you're going to post pictures online, please make sure they're tasteful. We don't want people thinking you couldn't do better. I read it 3 times, my jaw tightening with each pass. That was it. That was the moment I knew there'd be no holding back. Because what they were about to see on Facebook wasn't just going to be tasteful. It was going to be unforgettable. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before the alarm, staring at the ceiling in that surreal, quiet moment when you realize the day you've been planning for months has finally arrived. Emma was still asleep beside me, her breathing slow and even, her hand resting lightly on my chest. For a few minutes, I let myself feel the simple joy of it. No drama, no distractions, just the thought that by the end of the day, I'd be married to the woman I loved. But peace doesn't last long when my family is involved. Around 7 a.m., my phone started buzzing. At first, I ignored it, figuring it was friends or vendors confirming details. But when it buzzed again and again, I reached over to check. The first thing I saw was a Facebook tag. It was Melissa. I clicked on it and instantly felt my stomach drop. There, plastered across my feed for everyone to see, was a photo of Melissa, my mom, and a group of relatives at a long brunch table, all raising champagne glasses. The caption read, "Celebrating family where it counts." Couldn't think of a better way to spend the weekend. The timestamp? 6:53 a.m. It wasn't just the photo, it was the comments. My mom had replied underneath, "So glad we're all together for something meaningful. Love you all." Another relative chimed in, "Much better than sitting through a boring little wedding." Melissa had liked that comment. I felt my hands clench without meaning to. This wasn't them simply choosing not to come. This was them publicly declaring that my wedding wasn't worth their time, framing it as some insignificant event they were wise to skip. And because they tagged me, they made sure everyone connected to me could see it. It was humiliation, wrapped up in a fake toast and an Instagram filter. Emma woke up to find me sitting at the edge of the bed, phone in hand, staring at the screen like it was something dangerous. "What happened?" she asked, her voice still groggy. I turned the phone toward her. She read it, her face tightening with every line. When she looked up, her eyes were sharp. "They did that on purpose." "Of course they did," I said quietly. They could have just stayed silent, but they had to make a point. And as if that wasn't enough, the second betrayal came barely 2 hours later. We were getting ready. Emma was at her sister's house doing hair and makeup, and I was at the venue checking final details, when one of my groomsmen, Mark, pulled me aside. "Hey, you might want to know about this," he said carefully, pulling out his phone. He showed me a screenshot from a private Facebook group that Melissa ran for family and close friends. Apparently, she'd posted there the night before. "Heads up, if you're invited to Adrian's thing tomorrow, don't feel bad about skipping. It's not going to be much, just a small, no-frills get-together. We'll have something more fun here, with real drinks, for anyone who wants to swing by." The comments underneath made my stomach twist, people laughing, saying they'd rather be where the party's at. Some even said they'd RSVP'd to my wedding but might drop in to Melissa's instead. I just stood there, staring at Mark's phone, trying to decide which part hurt more. The fact that my own sister was openly undermining my wedding, or the fact that my mom had liked the post. I felt a strange calm wash over me, the kind that comes right before a storm. This wasn't just petty favoritism anymore. This was sabotage. She wasn't content to skip my wedding. She wanted to make sure other people skipped it too. She wanted to rewrite the story before it even happened. I didn't tell Emma right away. She had enough to focus on, and I didn't want to start her day with anger. But inside, I made a promise to myself. This was the last time my family would ever get to play the role of the puppet master in my life. And as I stood there, watching the final touches being put on the reception hall, The plan I'd been quietly building for days solidified into something sharper, more deliberate. They wanted to make a statement. I'd make one they'd never forget. By the time guests began arriving at the venue, the sting of what they'd done was no longer just sitting in my chest. It had settled deep, like a weight pressing on every breath. I smiled, shook hands, and greeted people, but inside I felt hollow. Every time my eyes drifted toward the front row, the two empty chairs stood out like neon signs. They weren't just empty seats, they were proof. Proof that my family had chosen not to be there. Proof that they'd rather sip champagne at some fun, alternative gathering than witness the vows I'd spent my whole life hoping to say. Emma's side of the family noticed. I could see it in the way her mom's smile flickered when she looked at the front row, or the way her cousins exchanged quiet glances. Even my best man, Chris, caught my arm before the ceremony started and muttered, "Man, I'm so sorry." He didn't have to explain why. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Emma was radiant. The vows were heartfelt. But there was a moment, just as we turned to face everyone after the kiss, when my gaze scanned the room almost on instinct. For a split second, I expected to see my mom's face in the crowd, Melissa rolling her eyes like she thought the whole thing was overly sentimental. But the space where they should have been was still painfully, deliberately empty. At the reception, I went through the motions, cutting the cake, clinking glasses, giving my toast, but I felt like I was watching it all from the outside. My joy kept hitting a wall, every happy moment shadowed by the thought of what they were doing right then. Were they laughing at me? Checking social media to see if they'd won the night? Maybe Melissa was posting another picture to make sure I saw them having a better time. When the photographer gathered everyone for the big group photo, I couldn't ignore the gap where they should have been standing. Later, when the DJ invited family up for the first dance circle, Emma's dad pulled me into a hug and whispered, "You've got us now." It was meant to be comforting, and it was, but it also broke something in me. Because it reminded me how absent my own blood was, and how normal that absence had become. That night, after the last guest left and the venue was quiet again, I slipped away to the side garden and sat alone under the string lights. Emma was inside with her friends, laughing over the last slices of cake, but I needed a moment to breathe. The cool air felt good, grounding, but my mind wouldn't stop circling the same thought. They didn't just miss my wedding, they chose to erase it. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Facebook. Sure enough, Melissa had posted again. A boomerang video of her and my mom clinking wine glasses at the winery, with the caption, "Perfect day, perfect company." Dozens of comments, heart emojis, people telling them how lovely they looked. And because she'd tagged me again, it was now sitting on my own timeline for everyone in my circle to see. Something about that broke the last thread of hope I had that they might regret it later. They weren't embarrassed, they were proud. I didn't reply. I didn't untag myself. I didn't even block them. Instead, I sat there under those lights, letting the anger burn low and steady. If I'd learned anything about my family, it was that reacting too soon only gave them more ammunition. But if I waited, if I was patient, I could make sure my response wasn't just emotional. It was unforgettable. As I watched the tiny white bulb sway overhead, I started piecing the plan together in my mind. This wasn't about getting even in the heat of the moment. This was about making sure that when I finally acted, they'd feel the sting for years. And in that quiet, with the laughter from the reception faint in the background, I made a promise to myself. I'd stop trying to earn a place in their version of family. Instead, I'd show them exactly what it felt like to be left out. The weeks after the wedding were strange, like living in two different realities. On one hand, my life with Emma was better than ever. We went on our honeymoon to this little coastal town in Italy, where the mornings smelled like espresso and the afternoons felt like time had slowed just for us. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly glancing at my phone, waiting for some passive-aggressive text from my mom or some new slight from Melissa. On the other hand, there was the silence. I didn't hear from them at all. Not a call, not a congratulations card, nothing. The only acknowledgement of my wedding from my side of the family was a single, half-hearted comment my mom left on one of Emma's honeymoon photos. "Looks fun." I knew better than to take it personally. This was their way of saying, "We're still not impressed." Instead of letting it eat at me, I put my focus into building the life Emma and I wanted. And little by little, that life started to grow in ways I hadn't expected. I'd been running my own design firm for a couple of years, mostly small projects, word-of-mouth clients. But about a month after the wedding, I landed a major contract with a real estate developer who wanted to revamp all their marketing materials. It was the biggest project I'd ever taken on, and when it launched, my business took off. Referrals started pouring in. I went from managing 2 part-time contractors to having a small team and an actual office space. Emma was thriving too. She got promoted to a senior position at her firm, which came with a pay bump and a lot more autonomy. We moved out of our cramped apartment into a 3-bedroom house with a backyard big enough for the dog we'd been talking about getting since our engagement. It was the kind of progress I knew Melissa and my mom couldn't stand. Not because they wanted bad things for me, exactly, but because they hated the idea that I could be happy, successful, and completely fine without their approval. I started posting more online, not in an obnoxious, bragging way, but enough to show the milestones. Photos of the new office, shots from industry events, little glimpses of our weekends exploring the city. I knew for a fact they saw every single one. They never liked or commented, but Sarah would quietly tell me, "Yeah, they've been talking about it. Melissa said you're trying to show off." In the past, that might have bothered me. Now, it only made me more deliberate, because I wasn't just building my life, I was building my leverage. A few months in, I got an unexpected call from an old friend who worked in event planning. She was organizing a high-profile charity gala and wanted to hire my firm to handle all the design work. It was going to be huge, hundreds of attendees, press coverage, the works. And when she mentioned the guest list, I nearly laughed out loud. My mom's best friend, the one she's always trying to impress, was going to be there. So we're a handful of Melissa's influential friends she liked to name drop at every family dinner. I said yes without hesitation. As the months rolled on, our social circle expanded. We started hosting dinner parties, going to fundraisers, getting invited to events that my family would have given anything to be part of. I wasn't chasing them anymore. I was in a completely different lane, and for the first time, they were the ones on the outside looking in. Every so often, Sarah would drop a little update that made me realize just how much it was getting to them. My mom had apparently started bringing up my name in conversations with this faux casual tone, like she was so happy I was doing well, only to slip in a dig about how it's easy when you marry into money, which wasn't even true. Melissa, meanwhile, had started making vague posts about people forgetting where they came from. I didn't respond. I didn't have to, because I knew the moment was coming, the perfect opportunity to make my point without saying a single cruel word. And when that opportunity came, it was going to hit them exactly where it hurt the most. It was almost a year after the wedding when the setup I'd been waiting for finally landed in my lap, though it came in the most ordinary way possible. I was in my office one Tuesday afternoon, wrapping up a client call, when my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. At first, I thought it was just another family update, but as soon as I opened it, I realized it was something different. She'd forwarded me a screenshot from Melissa's Facebook page. In it, Melissa had posted about her upcoming anniversary party. Apparently, she and her husband were planning a once-in-a-lifetime vow renewal ceremony and wanted to make it a massive social event. The caption was dripping with humble brag energy. "So excited to celebrate our love with the people who matter most." Normally, that would have just been eye-roll material. But then I noticed the details. She was hosting it at one of the city's most exclusive venues, a venue I happened to have just worked with for that high-profile charity gala. In fact, the owner and I had hit it off during the project, and he'd told me more than once, "Anytime you need the space, just say the word." That connection alone would have been enough to tuck away for later. But Sarah's next message is what made me stop mid-scroll. "She's been bragging about the guest list," Sarah wrote. "She's inviting half the city. But the thing is, she hasn't actually booked the venue yet. Says she's working out the details." I sat back in my chair, letting that sink in. Melissa was publicly hyping an event she hadn't locked down, at a venue I now had a direct line to. The universe couldn't have handed me a cleaner setup if it tried. I didn't do anything right away. Patience was still my best weapon. Instead, I filed that nugget of information away and kept working. Over the next few weeks, my position only got stronger. My business hit another growth spurt, thanks to a major contract with an international brand that boosted my profile. Emma and I were featured in a local lifestyle magazine as one of the up-and-coming couples in the community. Invitations to more exclusive events rolled in, and my network kept expanding. Through it all, I stayed connected with the venue owner, even collaborating with him on a new design concept for their marketing materials. He trusted me, liked me, and, most importantly, was willing to prioritize my requests. Then, about 2 months before Melissa's planned vow renewal, I got a call from Sarah that confirmed everything I needed. "She's still talking about it like it's a done deal," she said. But I overheard her telling Mom she hasn't signed anything yet. Said the deposit is a lot, and she's waiting for the right time. That was it. The moment the opportunity went from possible to guaranteed. I knew exactly how to move next, and how to do it without ever having to be the bad guy on paper. The only thing left was timing it perfectly so that when the trap closed, they'd have no way to back out without losing face. And as luck would have it, an even bigger chance to twist the knife was just around the corner, one that would make the sting unforgettable. 2 weeks later, the opportunity presented itself so cleanly it felt like the universe had gift-wrapped it for me. I was at the venue for a quick meeting with the owner, Martin, to finalize some design tweaks for his spring campaign. As we were wrapping up, he mentioned offhand, "By the way, I've had a lot of inquiries for summer weekends, especially August. People are scrambling to book." That was all I needed to hear. Melissa's anniversary party was planned for late August. If I wanted to, I could quietly make sure that weekend wasn't available by the time she got around to committing. And better yet, I could do it in a way that was completely above board. "Actually," I said casually, "Emma and I were thinking of hosting a big event later this summer. Sort of a delayed thank you party for everyone who supported us last year. Could be a great way to showcase the venue, too. August might be perfect if you've got space." Martin didn't even hesitate. "For you? Absolutely. What date?" I named the exact weekend Melissa had been bragging about. He pulled up the calendar, penciled me in, and within 5 minutes, the contract was signed. Deposit paid. Done. I didn't tell anyone, certainly not Sarah. This wasn't the kind of thing you risk leaking. Instead, I began planning the event for real. Emma loved the idea. She'd been wanting to throw a large get-together anyway, something bigger than our usual dinner parties. We decided to make it a semi-formal evening with live music, incredible food, and a guest list that mixed our friends, business contacts, and some of the most influential people we'd met over the past year. Over the next few weeks, I quietly made sure the right people knew about it. Not in a showy way, just a passing mention at other events, a save the date sent to a few strategic attendees who I knew also happened to be on Melissa's target guest list. Word travels fast in this city, especially when it's about something new and exclusive. Sure enough, about a month before her party date, Sarah called me, trying to keep her voice low. "So, Melissa just found out the venue's booked that weekend. She's furious. Apparently, they told her it's been reserved for months, and there's no way to move it." I could almost hear the sound of her pride cracking. "Did she say what she's going to do?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "She's scrambling to find a new location, but everywhere decent is either booked or way out of her budget. And Mom is livid. She's saying whoever booked it must have known." I didn't confirm or deny anything, just chuckled and said, "That's rough. Hope she figures something out." A week later, I started sending out our formal invitations. Sleek black envelopes with gold lettering, each one promising an unforgettable evening at one of the city's most sought-after venues. Emma and I had decided to go all out, top-tier catering, a jazz quartet, a champagne bar. And here's where the real sting came in. The invite list was so overlapping with Melissa's that I knew the comparisons would be inevitable. Sure enough, word got back to me within days. Guests who'd already RSVP'd to Melissa's vow renewal started politely declining her backup plan location, a bland banquet hall on the edge of town, and telling her they'd already committed to another event. By the time August rolled around, Melissa's once-in-a-lifetime party had been reduced to a half-empty gathering, while ours was a packed, glittering success. I didn't have to say a word about it to her. She knew. My mom knew. Everyone in the family knew. And the best part? I'd never lied, never confronted them, never even mentioned the booking. I'd simply moved first. The look on their faces when they eventually saw the photos from that night was going to be worth every ounce of patience I'd poured into the plan. The night of our event felt like the culmination of everything Emma and I had worked toward, not just in the last year, but in our entire journey together. The venue glowed under warm lighting, The air was filled with the hum of conversation and music, and everywhere I looked, people were laughing, toasting, connecting. It wasn't just a party. It was a statement, the kind my family could never rewrite or diminish. We didn't mention Melissa or my mom all night. We didn't need to. The guest list spoke for itself. Local business owners, city officials, a few well-known personalities, and plenty of friends who had stood by us. Every detail, from the signature cocktails to the dessert table, had been chosen with care. It was the kind of night that left people saying, "This is one to remember." And then, like clockwork, the fallout started trickling in. The next morning, Sarah sent me a text. "You should have seen Melissa's face when people at her party kept leaving early. By the time she cut the cake, half the tables were empty." Apparently, several of her must-have guests had only shown up to her backup venue long enough to be polite before heading across town to ours. A few even posted photos from both events in the same night, ours looking elegant and lively, hers looking sparse and awkward. My mom tried to save face. She posted one blurry group shot from Melissa's party with the caption, "Family first, always." But the comments betrayed the truth. People were asking why they hadn't been invited to ours, or remarking on how amazing it looked from the photos they'd seen online. One comment even read, "Looks like you picked the wrong party." Melissa didn't reply, but she quietly untagged herself from several of those posts. Over the next few weeks, the tension was palpable. My mom called once, her voice tight, and said, "You know, you really blindsided your sister with that event." I simply replied, "Funny, I thought you said life doesn't revolve around one person's plans." There was a long silence before she muttered something about being busy and hung up. Melissa hasn't spoken to me directly since. From what Sarah tells me, she's still complaining to anyone who will listen about how petty it was for me to book the venue. But every time she tells the story, she has to admit that she never locked it down in the first place. That detail makes her look less like a victim and more like someone who underestimated the very person she tried to humiliate. And me? I didn't gloat. I didn't throw their absence from my wedding back in their faces. I just kept living my life, thriving in the space they once thought I couldn't survive without them. Because the truth is, revenge wasn't about making them suffer in the moment. It was about showing them, without a single heated word, that I didn't need them to define my worth. They taught me that family could choose to exclude you. I taught them that I could choose to do the same.